Chapter 77. Within the Celadon wine cup, the wine that was as clear as spring water gently swayed without any impurities. A rich wine fragrance spread out from the cup and enveloped one's nostrils, causing one to be intoxicated at all times. King Yu swirled the wine in the cup. The mellow fragrance and spiciness that entered his mouth caused all the pores on his body to tremble. This was the first time he had tasted such a delicious wine. It was much better than the bejeweled nectar wine in the imperial palace, as expected of a store that even my father personally came to visit. Just this wine alone is enough to make one forget to leave, King Yu lamented. This was his first time coming to Bufang's store. In the past, he had only heard rumors about it. Only after tasting it personally this time did he truly feel the charm of the store's delicacies. The wine was good and the dishes were good. The orange-red sweet and sour ribs, that dense steam accompanied by the fragrance of the meat was simply like a beautiful painting, causing one to be involuntarily intoxicated. At the entrance of the alleyway, the Crown Prince, Ji Chungan, was walking with his hands behind his back and his head held high. Beside him was only Shusher. With a solemn expression, Shusher was single-handedly carrying a huge metal cage as he walked toward Bufang's store. Bufang, who had just walked out of the kitchen, looked toward the entrance with a slightly puzzled expression. He saw the Crown Prince and Shusher walk into the store and immediately place the metal cage on the ground. "Owner Bu, I'm here again," the Crown Prince said with a light smile as he looked at Bufang with a somewhat passionate gaze. If Bufang was able to cook the elixir cuisine, it should be able to delay the Emperor's illness. The Emperor would definitely look favorably upon him after he presented the elixir cuisine to him. This would allow him to stabilize his position as Crown Prince and obtain a greater competitive advantage. When he thought of all this, the Crown Prince's heart became even more passionate toward Bufang, who was able to cook the elixir cuisine. The Crown Prince raised his hand and grabbed the curtain. With a sudden tug, the metal cage was immediately revealed. A blood phoenix chicken with feathers that were as red as blood was quietly standing inside the metal cage with its eyes rolling around. Blood phoenix chicken? Bufang was slightly taken aback. Then, he looked at the Crown Prince with an odd expression. This guy actually went to such great lengths to catch a blood phoenix chicken. This was somewhat out of his expectations. That's right. Owner Bu naturally recognizes this blood phoenix chicken. However, I wonder if Owner Bu still remembers what he said before? The Crown Prince smiled. Bufang's face was expressionless as he circled around the steel cage and carefully sized up the blood phoenix chicken. In his heart, he could not help but compare this blood phoenix chicken with the one provided by the system. He discovered that this blood phoenix chicken was much inferior to the one provided by the system, whether it was in terms of vitality or size. The food ingredients provided by the system are all of high quality. After careful selection, they are all elites of various major varieties. The serious voice of the system rang in Bufang's mind. Bufang nodded. He believed that the system's products were of the highest quality. He had indeed promised the Crown Prince that if he could provide the ingredients, he would personally cook the sage herb phoenix chicken soup for him. What about the sage herb and the medicinal ingredients? Bufang simply asked. The Crown Prince's eyes immediately lit up. With a flick of his hand, a leather bag containing a huge pile of medicinal ingredients immediately appeared in his hand, and he handed it over to Bufang. The heavenly sage herb was framed in an exquisite wooden box and was carefully handed over to Bufang. The heavenly sage herb was very precious and its value was no less than that of the blood phoenix chicken. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult to collect it because the heavenly sage herb only grew in the wildlands. That was an extremely terrifying place with countless high-grade spirit beasts. Even a 7th-grade battle saint would face the danger of dying there. However, the heavenly sage herb was only a 5th-grade spirit herb, and it grew in the outskirts of the wildland. Therefore, the Crown Prince was able to collect it after spending a large sum of money. After taking the sage herb that did not look too good, Bufang nodded and simply said, "It will take a long time to cook the sage herb phoenix chicken soup. Today's opening hours are almost over. Come earlier tomorrow to collect the elixir cuisine. Because the ingredients for this elixir cuisine were provided by you, you are allowed to take it out." The smile on the Crown Prince's face froze. He was not going to cook it today? Was it because the opening hours were over? "Owner Boo, I really need this sage herb phoenix chicken soup right now. Can I cook it now?" the Crown Prince asked with a frown. He had spent a large amount of his savings on these ingredients, and he wanted to personally watch Bufang cook it. Otherwise, he would not feel at ease. Bufang gave the Crown Prince a glance and said, "The elixir cuisine is not as simple as you think it is. It requires a lot of skills and concentration. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask your imperial chef. To be honest, the quality of the ingredients you provided can only be said to be average. I really don't like them. However, I hate it when people doubt me. This is the first time and I forgive you. If there's a next time, you can take your ingredients and go back," Bufang expressionlessly said as he looked straight at the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince, Ji Chingon, was furious. Who in the entire Light Wind Empire dared to speak to him like that and even threaten him? "You!" The Crown Prince took a deep breath. When he thought of the store's background and recalled Bufang's culinary skills and the miraculous elixir cuisine, the corners of his mouth curled up. He held back his anger and smiled. "I have never doubted Owner Boo. All right, I will send someone to collect it tomorrow. I hope Owner Boo won't disappoint me," the Crown Prince said. "Ha ha ha!" Just as the Crown Prince finished speaking, a burst of laughter came from not far away. The laughter was filled with ridicule and playfulness. The Crown Prince slightly frowned and looked toward that corner. He immediately saw King Yu, who was dressed in luxurious clothes. King Yu raised a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. Then he stood up and walked toward the Crown Prince with a gentle smile on his face, as if he was a refined scholar. "My dear brother, I didn't expect to meet you here. TSK, are you planning to let Owner Boo cook the elixir cuisine? In order to prolong father's life?" King Yu simply said with a smile on his face. The pupils of both the Crown Prince and Xushi constricted. Their attention was previously focused on Bufang, and they did not notice that King Yu was also within the store. How could he possibly be here? The Crown Prince's heart palpitated and he was enraged. The Crown Prince suddenly gave Xushi a glance, and a profound look flashed through his eyes. Xushi's body slightly trembled as he fearfully took a step back and bowed toward the Crown Prince. "Ha ha ha! Second brother, what a coincidence! It seems like second brother was also attracted by Owner Boo's delicacies." A smile appeared on the Crown Prince's face as he nodded toward King Yu. King Yu, Ji Qingyu, was at the peak of 5th grade Battle King and was only a step away from becoming a Battle Emperor. He was the one with the highest cultivation level among the three princes. Even though the Crown Prince, Ji Qingyu, and the third prince, Ji Qingxue, were both 5th grade Battle Kings, they had only just stepped into the realm and were still much weaker than King Yu. Indeed, Owner Boo's dishes are truly delicious and the wine is also the best in the world. Big brother, if you have the chance, you should have a good taste. King Yu chuckled as he took out some crystals and placed them on the table before slowly walking out of the store. The smile on the Crown Prince's face gradually disappeared as he watched King Yu's figure disappear into the alleyway. His entire being became terrifyingly gloomy. With a high cultivation level, and having more than half of the supporters in the imperial court, King Yu, Ji Qingyu, could be said to be his greatest competitor as the Crown Prince. He was also the younger brother that caused him to be unable to eat or sleep in peace. "Owner Boo, can I really not cook it today?" The Crown Prince unwillingly turned his gaze toward Bufang and asked. "I can't," Bufang simply replied as he turned around and sat on a chair with an expressionless face. Also, the service fee for cooking this dish is 50 crystals. Remember to pay it. 50 crystals? The Crown Prince narrowed his eyes and placed the crystals on the table with a wave of his hand. Then he flicked his sleeves and left. He was the Crown Prince, and he did not lack money. Shusher let out a sigh as he frowned and followed the Crown Prince's footsteps. Very soon, the figures of the two of them also disappeared into the alleyway. All right, Xiaoyi, today's business hours are over. Bufang stood up and patted Ouyang Xiaoyi's head. After arranging for her to return, he turned around and grabbed the metal cage before walking into the kitchen. Chapter 78. With a dong sound, Bufang placed the metal cage in the kitchen. He stretched his body and lazily glanced at the blood phoenix chicken that was standing still in the cage. System: if the quality of this blood phoenix chicken is a little inferior, will it affect the efficacy of the elixir cuisine? Bufang puzzledly asked. If the quality of the ingredients is inferior, the efficacy of the elixir cuisine will naturally be inferior as well. This is common sense, the system solemnly said. Bufang was immediately speechless. He once again glanced at the blood phoenix chicken. It just so happened that the chicken had also turned its head around and was looking at Bufang with its rolling eyes. All right, this is the ingredient provided by the Crown Prince after all. I can't be blamed for the poor efficacy. Bufang indifferently thought about it and immediately felt at ease. After closing the store's door, Bufang did not immediately start cooking. Instead, he rested for a while and called out his system panel to check. Host: Bufang gender, male age, 20 true energy cultivation level. 3rd grade, has reached the level of releasing true energy. As the god of cooking in the fantasy world, the food in the future will definitely require true energy. Work hard, young man. Cooking talent. Unknown skills. Level 1 meteor cutting technique, 80 out of 100 tools. Fragment of the God of Cooking set, 3/4. God of Cooking overall rating. Apprentice chef can finally cook ingredients with true energy and start learning cutting technique. The road to the God of Cooking is open for you. Work hard. Work hard, young man. Current origin crystals sales amount to 3,600 origin crystals. True Chi conversion, 900/1000 system level. 3 stars. True energy conversion ratio, 25%. As his mind sank into the system panel, Bufang's expression remained unchanged. However, he was secretly excited. The sales volume had already reached 3,600 crystals. As long as he sold another 400 crystals, he would be able to complete the mission. The system would level up and his cultivation level would increase as well. 400 crystals was roughly equivalent to a day's worth of sales. Looks like I'll probably be able to level up after business ends tomorrow. I wonder what kind of special reward I'll get for leveling up to 4th grade Battle Spirit. However, the collection of the God of Cooking sets should be complete by then, Bufang muttered. After resting for a while, he also stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Cooking the Sage Herb Phoenix chicken soup required a lot of time and also required the use of true energy. Thus, Bufang did not dare to be careless in the slightest. He opened the door of the iron cage and directly grabbed the blood phoenix chicken out. This blood phoenix chicken was, after all, a 5th grade spirit beast. Even though it was restricted by the system within the store, it still had quite a bit of strength when it struggled. However, Bufang was an experienced chef after all. It was still very easy for him to deal with these ingredients. In just a short while, the blood phoenix chicken was completely prepared. After taking out the heavenly sage herb from the exquisite box and some of the medicinal ingredients he needed from the leather bag, Bufang started to prepare the elixir cuisine, the sage herb phoenix chicken soup. After King Yu returned to his manor, he was in a good mood. Perhaps it was because he had tasted the delicacies and wine. Ji Qingyu felt as if he was floating as he walked. I didn't expect the dishes of that store to be so delicious. That Iceheart Jade Urn wine is truly unforgettable. As he recalled the enchanting taste of the Iceheart Jade Urn wine, King Yu could not help but lick his lips as a hint of intoxication appeared in his eyes. It was another person who was captivated by Bu Feng's delicacies. King Yu suddenly regretted not going to Feng Feng's little store earlier. If he had, he would have been able to taste these delicacies earlier. Just as King Yu was thinking about the dishes cooked by Bu Feng, the head elder of the Soul sect, Hun Qianyun, appeared in front of King Yu with his subordinates. These people were all wrapped in black robes and had a rather eerie and terrifying appearance. A hint of disgust flashed through his eyes, but on the surface, King Yu was still smiling as he looked at them. I wonder if King Yu gained anything from that mysterious store? Hun Qianyun's hoarse voice rang out. It was as if his voice was rubbing against gravel, causing one's hair to stand on end. That elder brother of mine has already gathered the blood phoenix chicken. He brought the precious medicinal ingredients and blood phoenix chicken to the store and asked the owner to cook the elixir cuisine. However, the elixir cuisine can only be completed tomorrow, King Yu simply said. Oh? It can only be completed tomorrow? Hun Qianyun narrowed his eyes and his spirit fire flickered as if he was in deep thought. King Yu nodded and said, "The elixir cuisine isn't an ordinary dish after all. Even the owner of that mysterious store would have to spend some effort to cook it. However, this is good news for us." "King Yu, do you mean that I need to bring some people with me to destroy the soup tomorrow?" Hun Qianyun doubtfully asked. "That's right, it must be destroyed. Father is old and frail with hidden injuries all over his body. Forcefully extending his lifespan will only make him suffer even more. As a son, how can I hope to see my father suffering?" King Yu simply said. Then, his gaze fell on Hun Qianyun and he said, "Arrange for some people to bring along the experts from my manor and set up an ambush at the entrance of the alleyway tomorrow. Remember, you must destroy that sage herb phoenix chicken soup. If you fail this time, then you can leave with your people." Hun Qianyun indifferently stood in the distance. When he heard King Yu's words, the spirit fire in his eyes suddenly trembled. Then, he cupped his hands and retreated. As King Yu watched Hun Qianyun's disappearing figure, the corner of his mouth twitched. Then, he lightly shouted toward the distance, "Prepare a horse for me, I want to enter the palace." The Crown Prince's palace on the left side of the Gate of Heavenly Mystery. The Crown Prince, Ji Chungan, was sitting on a high seat with a gloomy expression. He was looking down at Xushi, who was kneeling on the ground. The corner of his mouth was slightly twitching, showing the anger he was suppressing. Xushi was also feeling a little fearful and helpless. He knew that the Crown Prince had already begun to suspect him ever since King Yu found out that they were going to Feng Feng's little store. "Xushi, can you explain to me why King Yu would appear in that store?" the Crown Prince simply asked. "I don't know." Xushi's face stiffened. "I just told you yesterday to keep the news a secret. Then, I ran into King Yu as soon as I arrived at the store. Could it be that all of this is a coincidence?" The Crown Prince chuckled. "Your Highness, do you not trust me?" Xushi raised his head and solemnly looked at the Crown Prince. "I have been following your Highness for several years. How could your Highness not understand what I am doing?" Xushi's tone was a little indignant and dispirited. Ji Chungan was slightly startled. When he saw Xushi's dispirited appearance, his ice-cold expression also softened. He believed that Xushi would not betray him. The reason he suspected Xushi today was because he was provoked by King Yu's gaze before he left. He was a dignified crown prince, why should he be bullied by a duke? All right, I was also blinded by anger. Xushi, I am naturally aware of your loyalty. Go and make arrangements for the expert. Since King Yu already knows that we asked Owner Bu to cook the sage herb phoenix chicken soup, the road to obtain the soup tomorrow will definitely not be safe. Find more experts with at least a 5th grade battle king. Yes, your Highness. I will take my leave first. Xushi solemnly nodded and left with his hands cupped together. However, after a while, Shusher, who had just left the Crown Prince's palace, hurriedly returned with an anxious expression on his face. "Your Highness, I just received news that King Yu entered the palace to meet His Majesty." The Crown Prince's eyebrows immediately twitched and a cold glint appeared in his eyes. He inwardly cursed Shusher for being despicable and also hurriedly changed his clothes before heading to the main hall to meet the Emperor. Night fell. 2 crescent moons hung high in the sky and black clouds lingered around them. At the entrance of the alleyway where Fong Fong's little store was located, one figure after another suddenly descended. These people were all wearing black nocturnal clothes. The aura on their bodies was surging and their true energy was surging. "We can't afford to make any mistakes in tomorrow's operation. We must finish setting up the magic array today." Among the figures, a stooped figure appeared. 2 gloomy spirit fires were burning in the night as his hoarse voice echoed in the air. Chapter 79. Imperial Palace, Main Hall. The Crown Prince was wearing a luxurious robe as he hurriedly entered. Inside the main hall, the Emperor was lazily sitting with one hand supporting his chin. His body would lightly tremble from time to time and faint coughs could be heard coming from his mouth. "Chengon, you're here. I heard from your second brother that you went to Owner Boo's place to prepare the elixir cuisine for me?" the Emperor softly said with a smile on his face when he saw the Crown Prince step into the main hall. Ji Chengon's expression slightly changed when he heard this. However, he still respectfully bowed toward the Emperor and said, "Father, I was just worried about your health. I heard that Owner Boo's elixir cuisine has the effect of prolonging one's lifespan, so I specially sent someone to the wilderness to purchase a blood phoenix chicken for Owner Boo to cook the elixir cuisine." King Yu Ji Qingyu was also in the main hall. He was standing far away with a smile on his face as he looked at the Crown Prince with interest. He had purposely come to the Imperial Palace to tell his father about this matter. Ji Chengon wanted to hide it from his father. When the time came and he suddenly presented the elixir cuisine that could prolong one's lifespan, his father would definitely look at him in a different light. However, now that he had already told his father about this, there was less anticipation and the impact of the shock would not be as strong. Furthermore, the most important point was that since his imperial father already knew about the elixir cuisine, there would definitely be a glimmer of hope in his heart. Once the elixir cuisine was destroyed, this glimmer of hope would also be crushed. When that time came, his imperial father would definitely not give the Crown Prince any face. King Yu's eyes flickered as he looked at the Crown Prince with a bright smile. The Crown Prince had already cursed King Yu countless times in his heart. How could he not know what King Yu was thinking? The reason he hid it from the Emperor back then was to make the Emperor look at him in a different light. Now that it had been messed up, the effect was greatly reduced. "Thank you, my son. I know my father's condition very well, but I appreciate your kindness." The Emperor lightly smiled, and a rare trace of kindness appeared on his face. The Crown Prince bitterly smiled in his heart. Now he could only hope that Shusher could safely deliver the elixir cuisine to the Imperial Palace. However, he knew that King Yu would definitely not let everything go so smoothly. Bu Fong frowned slightly and covered the lid of the clay pot with his palm. True qi kept gushing out of his body and flowing into the clay pot, constantly affecting the dishes inside. Bu Fong didn't use much true energy cooking, so he didn't dare to be careless in the slightest, for fear that a mistake would ruin the dish. Beads of sweat had appeared on Bu Fong's forehead, but he did not care about it. He was wholeheartedly focused on the true energy cooking. Finally, there was a slight change in his expression and the corners of his mouth slightly curled up. After dispersing the true qi, Bu Fong retracted his hand and exhaled a long breath. He picked up a cup of water on the table and took a sip. This water was cold and sweet. It was mountain spring water provided by the system and was filled with spirit energy. It had a nourishing effect on the body. When he opened the lid of the clay pot, He saw the blood phoenix chicken quietly lying inside. The steam was slightly agitated, causing the jelly-like meat to lightly tremble. The color of the chicken soup was orange-red, but it wasn't as bright as the one Bufang cooked for Xiao Yinyu. This was the reason for the poor quality of the ingredient. Even Bufang couldn't do anything about it. The essence of the sage herb and other medicinal ingredients had seeped into the chicken meat and chicken soup, causing a rich fragrance to billow out. The sage herb phoenix chicken soup was finished. Bufang covered the claypot again, stretched his back, and cracked his neck. He walked into the store and opened the door. The cold winter air blew into his face, making him feel refreshed after a night of exhaustion. He was also a little more spirited. As usual, the store opened for business. Bufang placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of Blackie and stroked its smooth and clean fur. Then, Bufang stood up, pulled out a chair, and contentedly curled up on it. He wanted to take a short break. However, this break did not last for too long. Fatty Jean and his army of fatties surged over and Bufang had no choice but to start his busy day. On the main street of the Imperial City, Xushi was leading a group of people toward Bufang's store with a solemn expression. The aura on their bodies was extremely powerful, and the fluctuations of their true qi were almost distorting the air. Xushi did not dare to be careless in the slightest in this operation to protect the soup. The Crown Prince was already somewhat dissatisfied with him. If he messed up this matter again, he would be kicked out of the Crown Prince's office. Therefore, he specially brought 5 Battle Kings with him to protect the soup in order to ensure that nothing went wrong. After all, 5 Battle Kings could already be considered as the top fighting force in the Imperial City. The entrance of the alleyway was quiet and peaceful. Xushi stepped into it with his group. Just as he stepped into the alleyway, his eyebrows immediately furrowed as if he sensed a chilling aura rising from under his feet. Could it be a misconception? Xushi lowered his head and glanced at the floor. It was still the same old bluestone slabs. Green moss was still emerging from between the cracks of the bluestone slabs. Everything was the same as usual. Perhaps it was a misconception. Xushi shook his head and bitterly smiled. Then, he led the group of people into Bufang's store. Within the store, there were a few scattered customers enjoying the dishes. These people were all rich and influential people in the Imperial City. Just like Fatty Jean, they did not lack money. "Oh, you're here." Bufang expressionlessly nodded when he saw Xushi striding into the store. "Wait a moment, wait for the smelly boss to finish cooking this dish," Ouyang Xiaoi charmingly said as she signaled Xushi to wait. Xushi was also a little nervous as he unhurriedly nodded. After a while, Bufang finished cooking the last dish. After asking Xiaoi to serve it to the customers, he personally carried a claypot out of the kitchen. The claypot was still steaming and a rich aroma was wafting in the air. Xushi's eyes immediately lit up. This was Owner Bu's elixir cuisine. Xushi carefully received the claypot from Bufang and solemnly expressed his gratitude. Then, he bid farewell to Bufang and turned around to walk out of the store. The 5 Battle Kings behind him also followed with solemn expressions. From the moment he received the elixir cuisine, Xushi's entire heart tensed up and he became extremely vigilant. Berserk true energy surged out from the bodies of each Battle King and lingered in the surroundings, guarding Xushi. Blackie, who was lying at the entrance, lazily raised its doggy eyes and glanced at the group of people. It snorted and continued to lie there. A gust of cold wind suddenly blew into the alleyway. It was even colder than a bone-chilling wind. Xushi and the others, who were carrying the elixir cuisine, had just stepped into the alleyway when all 6 of them simultaneously felt their hair stand on end. Their eyes instantly widened and emitted a sharp light as they scanned their surroundings. "Who's there? Show yourself!" With a loud shout, a Battle King expert ruthlessly smashed his fist in a certain direction with true energy surging around it. Buzz! The Battle King's pupils abruptly constricted when the punch that was filled with true energy collided with the air. Then, he discovered that the entire alleyway was emitting a black brilliance. Two black runic wheels that were rotating in the opposite direction actually appeared on the simple bluestone floor. Crap! This is the soul sex-killing array, the Hades soul-rending array. Shusher's complexion instantly turned pale, and the light in his eyes seemed to have faded away. The black brilliance suddenly rose up and enveloped the group of people within it as if it was pulling them into another world. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Figures wrapped in black robes appeared around the alleyway. The auras of these figures were extremely powerful, and the aura of the hunchbacked old man who was leading them was even more terrifying. With two balls of spirit fire pulsating, Han Qianyun indifferently said, "The prey has entered the array. Begin killing." Chapter 80. Boom Boom. The black gas was like a black fog that rose from the ground. In an instant it enveloped the entire array. A frightening and austere aura filled the alleyway. The 5 Battle Kings surrounded Shusher, who was carrying the sage herb phoenix chicken soup, with grave expressions. Their mission this time was to protect the elixir cuisine, so they had to focus all of their attention on protecting Shusher, who was carrying the elixir cuisine. Under the guidance of the 2 reverse-rotating black wheel formations, the black gas that filled the sky gradually formed a gigantic phantom above them. This phantom brought with it an extremely terrifying aura. This is the Hades soul-rending array. It's the soul sex secret array. Why would this array appear here? Shusher's eyes were filled with disbelief. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. His pupils abruptly constricted as he looked into the distance. There, figures wrapped in black robes appeared one after another. Members of the Soul Sect? Are you guys here to destroy the elixir cuisine? Shusher sternly shouted. Let's do it. Don't waste time talking to him. Remember, don't leave anyone alive. Our identities cannot be revealed. A hoarse voice rang out. It was as ear-piercing as the grinding of gravel. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The figures wrapped in black robes did not say anything. One after another, they shot out and stood at the corner of each formation, completely surrounding Shusher and the others within the formation. Han Qianyun, whose eyes seemed to have 2 balls of spirit fire pulsating within them, slowly walked out with his hunched back. At this moment, Shusher's heart had already completely sunk to the bottom. No matter how careful he was, he still fell for King Yu's trap. Shusher had always thought that no matter how crazy King Yu was, he would at most send a few powerful assassins to destroy the elixir cuisine. However, he never expected that King Yu would actually collude with experts from the sects. The reason the experts from the sects were able to resist the imperial court for so many years was because of their mysterious methods and resources. They were able to forcefully endure Emperor Chongfeng's continuous attacks year after year. The sects were not to be trifled with. They were very powerful, and any cultivator from the empire knew this very well. Formations were precisely one of the methods these sects were proficient in. King Yu actually dared to collude with experts from the sects. Isn't he afraid of His Majesty finding out? Shusher angrily roared as he clenched his teeth. Han Qianyun let out a soft cry of surprise. His gaze fell on Shusher as he laughed with a hoarse voice. How would the Emperor know? If I kill you, neither the heavens nor the earth will know. Shusher still wanted to say something, but the experts from the other sects did not want to waste any more time with him. They immediately activated their true energy, and the black shadow above Shusher and the others slammed down on them. A huge palm made entirely of black chi slammed toward Shusher. The energy fluctuations were extremely intense. Block it! Shusher's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he roared. One of the Battle Kings let out a long roar, and the true energy around his body almost solidified. His entire body rose from the ground and blasted out a full-powered attack at the incoming palm. However, this powerful Battle Monarch attack was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. It did not cause any damage to the palm at all. Bang! With a loud bang, the Battle King was ruthlessly slammed into the ground, causing the ground to violently tremble and crack open. All the true energy in the Battle King's body dissipated, and he was actually smashed to death by a single palm strike. Xuxer's heart suddenly turned cold. The might of this magic array was indeed incomparably powerful. Han Qianyun faintly smiled. He stretched out his withered finger and suddenly pointed at Xuxer as he coldly said, "They must all die." The Crown Prince was sitting cross-legged in the Crown Prince's palace with his eyes closed. He wanted to calm down and cultivate in peace. However, after cultivating for a while, he still helplessly opened his eyes and let out a long sigh. "Phew! I wonder how Xuxer is doing. My eyelids have been twitching, and I keep having a bad feeling about this." The Crown Prince frowned as he stood up and looked outside the window. He originally thought it would be a clever move to have Owner Bu cook a portion of sage herb phoenix chicken soup for his father. However, he did not expect that King Yu would use some tricks to turn it into a rotten trick to trap him. The Crown Prince was also a bit helpless and could not help but feel a bit regretful. Right now, he was in a dilemma. He could only hope that Xuxer would be able to safely bring back the sage herb phoenix chicken soup. Only then would he not shoot himself in the foot. King Yu's manner. King Yu held a handful of crystal powder in his hand as he stood in front of the fish pond and contentedly fed the fishes. As he watched the fishes in the pond fight each other for the crystal powder, the smile on his face became colder and colder. A slight sense of oppression caused Bufang, who was curled up on the chair, to slightly frown. He stood up from the chair, walked to the door and looked toward the entrance of the alleyway. He saw a gigantic humanoid silhouette blocking the entrance of the alleyway. "What are they doing over there? Don't they know that this will hinder my business?" Bufang frowned and was somewhat unhappy. The store was already located in a remote area, yet this group of people just had to cause trouble at the entrance of the alleyway. Were they deliberately making things difficult for him, Bufang? Ouyang Xiaoyi also curiously stuck her head out and looked at the towering and majestic silhouette. Her flushed face was filled with shock. "Smelly boss, what are they doing?" Xiaoyi curiously asked. "They're up to something," Bufang lightly said as he patted Xiaoyi's head. Just as he finished speaking, his eyes narrowed. The gigantic silhouette suddenly exploded and a figure shot out like a cannonball toward the direction of the store. "Owner Bu, save me!" A heart-wrenching cry rang out. Xuxer was running over in a sorry state with blood dripping from his entire body. One of his arms was completely shattered and blood was continuously dripping down from his body as he ran. However, his other hand was tightly hugging onto the scalding claypot. Bang! Xuxer was completely exhausted by the time he arrived in front of Bufang. He was kneeling on the ground with blood spurting out of his mouth and bleeding from his arm. He was trembling as he hugged onto the claypot and did not let a single drop of chicken soup spill out. Ouyang Xiaoyi was so frightened by Xuxer's miserable state that her face turned pale. She quickly hid behind Bufang and timidly looked around. Bufang frowned as he looked at the silhouette that was slowly moving toward the alleyway. He then looked at Xuxer, who was kneeling on the ground and covered in blood. For some reason, a wave of anger suddenly emerged in his heart. "You actually dare to beat up my customer to this state? This is a blatant provocation to Fang Fang's little store," Bufang expressionlessly said, but his voice was extremely cold. "Bu, Owner Bu, the sage herb phoenix chicken soup cannot be destroyed." Xuxer tremblingly handed over the scalding claypot to Bufang with a trace of pleading and helplessness in his eyes. A wave of black energy suddenly gushed out from his body and instantly covered Xuxer's skin. Black smoke was rising from his 7 orifices. Bufang's pupils constricted. He could feel the trace of pleading in Xuxer's eyes and could not help but want to take the sage herb phoenix chicken soup. However, a black spear suddenly shot toward them at a speed that almost surpassed the speed of sound and directly pierced through the claypot. With a clang, the claypot shattered. At that moment, time seemed to have stopped in front of Bufang and Shusher. After the spear pierced through the claypot, its momentum did not decrease at all. It actually directly smashed toward Blackie, who was lying on the ground, and then pierced into the head of Blackie, who was sleeping soundly. With a bang, the long spear collapsed, and Blackie opened its drowsy eyes. "Damn it! Who used an embroidery needle to stab you, Lord Go? Stand up for the Lord Go." Blackie suspiciously looked around, then its eyes locked onto the silhouette in the distance. Shusher blankly stared at the claypot shattering. The sage herb phoenix chicken soup spilled all over the ground, and the sparkling jelly-like chicken meat rolled on the ground. After letting out a long sigh, Shusher hopelessly closed his eyes. Smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. His entire soul had been completely incinerated. "You must be the owner of this mysterious store." A figure wrapped in a black robe walked over. Behind him was the silhouette of Hades, which was controlled by a gigantic magic array. "You were the one who killed him? You were the one who destroyed the soup?" With an expressionless face, Bufang coldly turned his head around and looked at the black-robed figure. Hun Qianyun's soul flame-like eyes lightly flickered. With a hoarse voice, he lightly laughed. "Everyone says that this store of yours is incomparably mysterious. Even Xiao Meng, a 7th-grade battle saint, was forced to retreat. The power of my Hades soul-rending array is not inferior to that of a 7th-grade battle saint. I would like to test the limits of your store. To pay tribute to my 2 little fellows who died." Bufang knitted his eyebrows. He glanced at Hun Qianyun and coldly said, "I'm asking you if you were the one who killed him, and if you were the one who destroyed the soup. You only need to answer yes or no." "Reckless fool. You still dare to be so arrogant in front of my Hades soul-rending array. So what if I was the one who killed him and destroyed the soup?" Hun Qianyun was also a little angry. True energy suddenly gushed out from his body, causing the Hades to become a little more corporeal. Blackie lazily crawled up from the ground and glanced at the silhouette of Hades. It rolled its eyes and rolled its eyes. Even if Hades really crawled out from the netherworld, this Lord Go is not afraid. "What are you pretending to be, a counterfeit?" A gentle and pleasant male voice immediately came out from Blackie's mouth and lingered in the alleyway. Chapter 81. Who? Just who is it? When Hun Qianyun heard this extremely arrogant voice, the spirit fire in his eye sockets abruptly flared up and the aura on his body became even more terrifying. He scanned his surroundings in an attempt to find the person who spoke. However, he did not find anyone who had the confidence to speak. The customers in the store cowered in fear after being glared at by him. That mysterious person was definitely not among the customers. Bufang frowned with a calm expression. The chicken soup that was scattered all over the ground was emitting steam. The steam naturally dissipated when it was blown by the cold wind, accompanied by the rich fragrance of the chicken soup. Sensing killing intent toward the host. Activating protection mode. A mechanical voice rang out as a gigantic white figure rapidly rushed out from the store and landed beside Bufang with a loud bang. Xiao Bai stood ramrod straight as its mechanical eyes emitted a red glow. A puppet? Hun Qianyun could not find the person who spoke, so he gave up on searching. His gaze landed on Xiao Bai, who had appeared beside Bufang, and he was slightly astonished. Even though Hun Qianyun had heard of the achievements of this mysterious store, he had never seriously investigated it. He only knew that this store was very powerful and was able to force back the 7th-grade battle saint Xiao Meng. However, he did not know exactly how powerful it was. Looking at it now, could it be because of this puppet? The big black dog slowly walked over with cat-like step. When it discovered that Xiao Bai had appeared beside Bufang, it rolled its eyes and stopped moving forward. "Killing my customers and destroying my dishes. This is simply unforgivable." Bufang took a deep breath. His gaze became focused and became a little cold. Humph. You sure talk big. Today, I want to see just how capable this store of yours is. Hun Qianyun sneered and took a step back. With a wave of his withered arm, the gigantic Hades phantom behind him immediately moved. The black mist rolled, and the phantom raised its hand. Then, a black spear appeared once again. The black mist lingered around the spear, and the energy fluctuations surged violently. With a sudden tearing sound, the virtual shadow of Hades threw out the spear with all its might. The spear whizzed toward Bufang's position, and the air seemed to be torn apart. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered, and in a flash, he appeared in front of Bufang. He raised his huge mechanical arm and smashed it toward the black spear that was piercing through him. Boom! A huge explosion rang out as gales whizzed out in an instant. The entire alleyway seemed to be enveloped by a black fog, and in an instant, it was completely submerged. The customers inside Bufang's store were all startled by the terrifying sound. However, what surprised them was that the black fog did not surge into the store, as if it was separated by a layer of protective film. Hun Qianyun sneered as he looked into the distance. Even a 7th-grade battle saint would suffer quite a bit from the might of the Nether King's void spear. A mere puppet. Could it be that it could defy the heavens? Boom! Within the black fog, 2 red rays of light blossomed. Then, the red rays of light turned into an ice-cold purple color. A gust of gales whizzed out and completely dispersed the black fog. When the black fog was completely dispersed, the scene in the scene was revealed. After Hun Qianyun saw it, his spirit fire's pupils violently twitched, and he was extremely shocked. Xiao Bai's entire body glowed with a metallic luster, and its mechanical eyes turned into an ice-cold purple color. Its arms were stretched out in front of its body, and it seemed to have blocked Hades' void spear. There was not even the slightest trace of the spear on its body. Bufang indifferently stood behind Xiao Bai as he expressionlessly looked at Hun Qianyun. There was not the slightest trace of worry or fear on his face. Battle mode activated. Xiao Bai's mechanical voice became even colder, and its purple eyes seemed to contain a monstrous, killing intent. The purple-eyed Xiao Bai's figure let out a buzzing sound, and it instantly shot forward. Its speed was so fast that it was difficult for the naked eye to follow. A suffocating pressure suddenly pressed toward Hun Qianyun. Hun Qianyun angrily snorted. He stretched out his withered palm and borrowed the power of Hades' silhouette behind him to guide the black fog to wrap around his body. Then, he swung his palm toward Xiao Bai. As the two collided, a violent energy wave poured out. The walls in the alleyway suddenly cracked, as if they were about to collapse from the impact of the energy wave. Hun Qianyun's expression changed. If they continued to fight with such power, it would definitely attract the attention of the Imperial City's patrols and experts. He had to end the battle as soon as possible. All of you, kill the owner of the store. I'll hold off this puppet. As a veteran, Hun Qianyun naturally understood the principle of capturing the ringleader first. This puppet was obviously there to protect Bufang. As long as Bufang was killed, the puppet would lose its target and stop functioning. The 6 Battle King experts wrapped in black robes behind Hun Qianyun also understood what he meant. They controlled the Hades silhouette to press toward Bufang, one step at a time. As the gigantic Hades silhouette moved in the alleyway, it seemed as if it was about to burst through the alleyway. Bufang indifferently looked at the approaching Hades silhouette. He patted Ouyang Xiaoyi's head and told her to hide inside the store. With the store's protection, she should be safe. Is this kid courting death? Why isn't he running away when faced with the Hades silhouette we're controlling? One of the Battle Kings controlling the magic array said in astonishment. He must be so scared that his legs have gone soft and he doesn't have the strength to run away. Once the Hades soul-rending array is activated, its power is comparable to a 7th-grade battle saint. Another Battle King sneered. Why isn't that kid pissing his pants? How can a third-grade trash like him resist the pressure of a seventh-grade battle saint? Bufang paid no heed to the Battle King's mocking words. The so-called pressure of a seventh-grade battle saint was practically non-existent to him. Due to the existence of the system, he was completely unaffected by the pressure. Furthermore, he was not worried about his own safety in the slightest. Blackus slowly walked out with cat-like step. It gracefully and nobly walked between Bufang and the Hades silhouette. Blackie raised its head and blinked its doggy eyes at the enormous Hades silhouette formed by the black gas. A hint of disdain flashed across its eyes. Shoo shoo shoo. Where did this big black dog come from? Get lost. A Battle King speechlessly looked at the big black dog squatting between Bufang and them. His mind was filled with black lines as he hurriedly chased it away. This big black dog did not have the slightest trace of spirit energy on its body. Its appearance was so ordinary that it was no different from the big black dog next door. It was no wonder that the Battle Kings could not recognize it. Idiot! Are you talking to me, the Lord Go? Blackie arrogantly raised its doggy head. Its gentle, manly voice carried a hint of mockery as it resounded. The 6 Battle Kings were instantly stunned. Their thoughts were in a mess for a moment. Holy sh*t. This was a freaking talking dog? Idiot. Do you dare to tell the Lord Go to get lost? Are you tired of living? Are you trying to provoke the Lord Go with a knockoff Hades? The big black dog continued. This big black dog that had become a spirit was so arrogant. The 6 Battle Kings were instantly enraged. A dog dared to act tough in front of them. This was simply too much. Damn dog. If I don't chop you into pieces and cook you into a hot pot today, I'll change my surname to yours. One of the Battle Kings with a fiery temper could not hold it in any longer. He angrily shouted and controlled the Hades silhouette to form a black spear. The spear tore through the air and pierced through the small black hole. This knockoff dares to call itself the Hades Void Spear? It's as powerful as an embroidery needle. It's not even enough to scratch an itch for the Lord Go, Blackus said indifferently as he rolled his eyes. The black spear ruthlessly struck Blackus' head. Blackus' dog ears slightly flapped, and the spear instantly broke into pieces, turning into black smoke that filled the sky and dissipating. The 6 Battle Kings' bodies froze. What just happened? Their eyes were blurred and they couldn't see clearly. Although it's not that damned old man from the netherworld, this Lord Go still hates this guy. He discusses this Lord Go while he sleeps, so all of you, go to hell, Blackus said indifferently. Blackus said indifferently. Then, it stretched out a cute and exquisite dog paw and slowly patted the Nether King's phantom. Bufang's eyes slightly twitched. In his line of sight, the dog paw that Blackie had stretched out expanded in the blink of an eye, turning into a dog paw that covered the sky. Blackie glanced at the Hades silhouette under the dog paw and disdainfully snorted. Then, his dog paw lightly slapped down. Chapter 82. There was no earth-shattering explosion, nor was there a raging storm. Under Blacka's paw, the Hades silhouette was instantly shattered inch by inch and silently dissipated. The 6 Battle Kings felt as if their minds were about to shatter the moment Blackie made his move. Under that terrifying pressure, they simply could not muster up the slightest courage to resist. A harmless big black dog had turned into a life-reaping king of hell in the blink of an eye. This change almost caused the 6 Battle Kings to collapse. The reverse magic array made a cracking sound and was covered in cracks. Then, it suddenly shattered. The 6 Battle Kings spat out blood and knelt on the ground. They wanted to escape, but their bodies were so stiff that they would not listen to their commands. Poochie! Blacka's paw slammed onto the ground, causing it to slightly tremble. It was as if the sound of bones being crushed could be heard. In the distance, Hun Qianyun was so frightened that his soul almost flew out of his body. What the heck? So the most terrifying thing about this store is not the purple-eyed puppet, but the big black dog lying at the entrance. Just what is the origin of this store? To be able to shatter Hades's soul-rending array with a single paw and kill 5 battle kings. Just what kind of cultivation level does this big black dog have? Could it be a supreme 9th grade spirit beast? A supreme 9th grade spirit beast guarding the entrance? Are you King kidding me? Hun Qianyun felt so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He could not help but feel a little regretful. His brain must have been caught in the door to have continued to cause trouble for this store. Originally, he had already completed his mission, yet he actually wanted to ruin this store as well. Now, he had gone for wool and come home shorn. Instead, he had lost 6 battle kings. He might even have to die here. Black's doggy paw gradually recovered and became small and dainty again. It shook its doggy paw in disgust and glanced at Hun Qianyun. It rolled its doggy eyes and returned to the entrance with cat-like step. It lay down and slept soundly. Bufang seemed to already know Black's temperament. It was not the first time this lazy dog went to sleep after acting cool. Ouyang Xiaoyi stood inside the store and held onto the door frame. Her large eyes were sparkling as she stared at Blackie with a glimmer of admiration. Blackid is so powerful. Do you really want to know what breed of dog it is? Black's squinted eyes twitched and slightly opened. When it saw Ouyang Xiaoyi's glowing eyes, it immediately snorted and turned its head away. Don't keep staring at the Lord Go. The Lord Go isn't interested in little human girls. Woof. Bufang expressionlessly walked a few steps and came to the big pit that was created by Little Black. A huge dog paw print appeared and a faint black gas rose from it. In that huge pit, the bodies of the 6 battle monarchs had already been smashed into minced meat, and they couldn't be more dead in the distance. The strength of Hun Qianyun, who had lost the support of Hades' soul-rending formation, immediately dropped below the level of a 7th grade battle saint. He was no match for purple-eyed Xiaobai at all. He was struck by a punch and his entire body was fiercely smashed into the wall of the alleyway, sinking deep into it. Xiaobai's purple eyes flickered as he walked toward Hun Qianyun with an ice-cold killing intent. Suddenly, a huge ball of spirit fire rose up from the ruins. It carried a figure as it sped out and disappeared into the distance in an instant. It turned out that Hun Qianyun knew that there was nothing he could do to reverse the situation, so he clenched his teeth and used the sect's secret technique to escape. The price of using this secret technique was extremely huge, and he only used it as a last resort. Otherwise, he would have been beaten to death by purple-eyed Xiaobai. After his target disappeared, Xiaobai was stunned for a few seconds. He raised his mechanical arm and scratched his bald head. Then, the purple in his eyes faded and turned red once again. As he gazed at the messy alleyway, the corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. It seemed like he would have to ask the Crown Prince to send someone to repair this alleyway when he arrived. Otherwise, he would not be able to continue his business. Shusher's corpse had already turned into a mummy. His soul had been completely burned away, and the skin on his body had also shrunk due to dehydration. As he lightly sighed, Bufang also felt a little helpless. He did not know what to say and could only wait for the Crown Prince to resolve the issue himself. When the customers in the store saw that the battle seemed to have ended, they all bid farewell to Bufang and hurriedly left. In the end, only Bufang and Ouyang Xiaoyi were left in the store. Not long after, the Imperial City's patrol team arrived one after another. Xiao Meng also arrived with a gloomy expression and landed in the alleyway that was filled with ruins. The battle seemed to be a little desperate. Xiao Meng looked down from the sky and saw the huge dog paw print. His pupils slightly constricted as he fearfully glanced at Blackie, who was lying at the entrance. When he saw Shusher's corpse, he was slightly startled and helplessly sighed. He sent someone to the Crown Prince's palace to inform the Crown Prince and then began to clean up the battlefield. That dog paw was really domineering. It directly turned 6 battle kings into mincemeat. I can't even confirm their identities anymore. Xiao Meng did not know whether to laugh or cry. When he saw Shusher's corpse and the sage herb phoenix chicken soup that was splattered all over the ground, Xiao Meng roughly guessed what happened. Then, his gaze became somewhat cold. The way Shusher died should be due to the soul sex methods. Could it be that the battle between the Crown Prince and King Yu involved the sex? This is not a good thing. Xiao Meng murmured softly. After a long while, the Crown Prince finally hurriedly arrived with his subordinate. When he saw the chicken soup that was splattered all over the ground and the corpse of Shusher, he could not hide the sorrow on his face. He clenched his teeth and the muscles on his face were trembling. He silently took away Shusher's corpse and promised Bufang that he would repair the damaged alleyway. Then, the majority of his troops left one after another. The alleyway once again became low-key. Of course, that was if one did not look at the shattered limestone and the huge dog paw print that was scattered all over the ground. When Ouyang Xiaoyi left the store and returned to the Ouyang mansion, Bufang also closed the store. The store's business hours for the day had ended. Just as he closed the store, the system's solemn and earnest voice sounded out in his mind. Congratulations to the host for achieving a turnover of 4,000 crystals and completing the short-term target. You will soon receive the system's reward. The system's reward is being released. Bufang was startled for a moment. Then, the corners of his mouth slightly curled up and a smile appeared on his stiff face. He finally leveled up. It was not easy for him to spend so much time on a turnover of 4,000 crystals. However, no matter what, he managed to endure it. After completing the turnover, he would be able to level up and obtain strength. Even though his combat ability was very weak, at least his true energy level would catch up. That was enough. Young man, congratulations on completing the short-term target in order to become the god of cooking who stands at the top of the food chain in this fantasy world. You have taken another solid step toward becoming the god of cooking. Reward. Red braised meat recipe, Big Dipper carving technique training technique, 1 fragment of the god of cooking set. Congratulations to the host for collecting all 4 fragments of the god of cooking set. You will randomly draw an accessory from the god of cooking set. Random drawing beginning, drawing in progress. Drawing complete. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, God of Cooking Set. The series of words from the system made Bufang feel a little overwhelmed. However, when he calmed down and sorted out the information, he quickly understood everything. Is the dish I obtained this time the red braised meat? When Bufang heard the system mention this term, he could not help but lick his lip. In his mind, the image of the steaming hot, rosy meat in a small clay pot appeared. The glistening oil made him unable to resist the urge to eat. Red braised meat was his favorite. The appearance of the carving technique also brought an unexpected surprise to Bufang. Bufang was extremely weak in the area of carving technique. Now, he could properly make up for this shortcoming. However, what surprised Bufang the most was the god of cooking set that he had been looking forward to for a long time. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife. A kitchen knife made from dragon bones? What a domineering name. Chapter 83. Host. Bufang True Energy Cultivation Level. 4th grade, has already reached the level of true energy into the spirit. As the god of cooking of the fantasy world, use your true energy into the spirit to reform the ingredient. Young man, work hard. Cooking talent. Unlock skills. Level 1 Meteor Cutting Technique, 90 out of 100. Level 1 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 0 out of 100. Tools. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, God of Cooking Set, God of Cooking Overall Rating. Beginner chef can use true energy to cook and process ingredient. Beginning to learn cutting and carving technique. The path to becoming the god of cooking has begun. Work hard, young man. System level 4 stars. Origin energy conversion ratio is at 50%. Host is allowed to capture ingredient. Bufang calmed his mind and observed the system panel that appeared in his mind. With the completion of the mission, the system level had also advanced to 4 stars. The origin energy conversion ratio had also reached 50%. This meant that his rate of advancement would increase by a lot. However, reaching 5th grade Battle King required 10,000 crystals of origin energy. The system's origin energy conversion ratio was at 50%. In that case, he would need to earn 20,000 crystals in order to advance 20,000. Bufang was expressionless. He did not know what to say. According to the current prices of these dishes, how long would it take for him to reach a sales volume of 20,000 crystals? Forget it, there was no point in thinking about this now. He might as well properly study the upgraded system. System, what does the so-called allowing the host to capture ingredients mean? When Bufang saw the last message, he was a little puzzled and could not help but ask the system. Before 4 stars, the host's ingredients are all provided by the system. After 4 stars, the host can choose the ingredients he wants to capture. The system will set the price for the dishes the host uses the captured ingredients to cook, the system seriously and solemnly said. Bufang was stunned. Capturing ingredients? With a chef with a combat level of 5? The god of cooking set, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, has a suppressive effect on most ingredient. I believe the host can do it. Work hard, young man, the system said. Bufang felt that this was a very serious question that he had to clarify. Therefore, he continued to ask the question in his mind. System, where do I go to capture ingredients? Around the Imperial City? The system will provide a teleportation function that can bring the host to the gathering place of ingredients in the wildland. It sounded very impressive, but would it really be alright to send it to the food gathering place? Bufang always felt so unsafe. Just as Bufang was thinking about these questions, the true qi in his body suddenly boiled up, which made his eyes slightly lit up. He knew that this was the sign of a breakthrough. The main difference between a 3rd grade battle maniac and a 4th grade battle spirit was the formation of a true energy vortex within the Dantian. This true energy vortex was equivalent to the soul of true energy and controlled the flow of true energy. That was why it was called a battle spirit. At this moment, Bufang could feel a steady flow of hot air coming from his lower abdomen. The true energy in his body was rapidly converging toward that area and slowly forming a vortex. Bufang looked inside himself and could see that there was a true energy vortex that resembled a galaxy circulating within his lower abdomen. There was no expression on Bufang's face, but the hint of joy in his eyes could not be concealed. He stretched out his hand and waved it toward the air. With a thought, a stream of true energy burst forth from the true energy vortex. Compared to before, the Bufang who had become a battle spirit was much more proficient in controlling true energy. After controlling the true energy for a while, Bufang had already gotten used to the changes in his true energy. His joyful mood gradually calmed down and he turned his attention toward the god of cooking set. System, what about the golden dragon bone kitchen knife? How do I retrieve it? Bufang asked. The system is sending it out right now. Please do not rush it, the system solemnly replied. Bufang was momentarily stunned and did not know what to say. However, soon after, a speck of light appeared in the air in front of him. The speck of light continuously shuttled back and forth and actually drew out a mysterious magic array in the air. A buzzing sound rang out and something seemed to be slowly emerging from within the magic array. Roar! As Bufang stared at the magic array, a deafening dragon roar suddenly resounded, causing Bufang's mind to tremble and his eardrums to vibrate. From within the magic array, a pitch-black kitchen knife slowly floated out. Around the kitchen knife, there was actually a tiny golden dragon simulacrum that was roaring angrily. The dragon roar came from the mouth of the divine dragon simulacrum. An invisible pressure instantly enveloped the store. Bufang's body and mind sank, as if he was facing an incomparably majestic mountain. He was almost unable to breathe. Outside the store, Blackie, who was lying at the entrance to take a nap, suddenly opened its doggy eyes and looked toward the store with a grave expression. It was extremely vigilant. However, as if it had thought of something, Blackie rolled its doggy eyes and went back to sleep. The golden divine dragon simulacrum dashed out and instantly bit Bufang's wrist. Bufang felt a slight pain as a drop of dark red blood flowed out from his wrist. It was enveloped by the divine dragon simulacrum and slowly flew toward the kitchen knife. In the end, Bufang's blood was devoured by the kitchen knife. The pressure from the majestic mountain also instantly dissipated, and the divine dragon simulacrum also disappeared. A simplified version of the divine dragon appeared on the wrist that was bitten. Bufang's mind seemed to have established a connection with the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. With just a thought, he would be able to make the kitchen knife enter the icon on his wrist. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife, god of cooking set, has been delivered. Host, please accept it, the system lightly said. Bufang's eyes focused as he held the simple and unadorned golden dragon bone kitchen knife that was floating in the air. Suddenly, a feeling of harmony spread from the bottom of his heart. His fingers moved and his wrist flicked. Holding the kitchen knife, Bufang easily swung out an incomparably gorgeous knife flower. Holding the kitchen knife, the corners of Bufang's mouth slightly curled up and revealed a trace of a smile. As expected of the god of cooking set, it was so easy to use. Originally, Bufang thought that the golden dragon bone kitchen knife would be an incomparably gaudy kitchen knife made from golden dragon bones. He did not expect that its true appearance was actually an unassuming black iron kitchen knife. Golden dragon bone kitchen knife, one of the accessories of the god of cooking set. Forged from the dragon bones of a golden divine dragon, it possesses the might of a divine dragon. It has a suppressive effect on all spirit beasts and has a killing effect on all spirit beasts below the 7th grade. The host will consume half of his true energy to activate it and can transform into the shape of a kitchen knife. The kitchen knife has a spirit energy enhancement effect when processing ingredients and can prevent the loss of the ingredient's spirit energy, the system introduced. It can even transform? Bufang was slightly surprised. After all, it was a god of cooking set and it was indeed extraordinary. He could not look at this kitchen knife like how he would look at an ordinary kitchen knife. Moreover, Bufang suddenly thought of the main reason why the system allowed him to go to the wildlands to capture ingredients was probably because he had obtained the god of cooking set. With the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, he could kill spirit beasts below the 7th grade. Even if he was a weakling, he would still be invincible when facing spirit beasts below the 7th grade with this kitchen knife. System 4 stars. I just happened to gather 4 fragments of the god of cooking set and exchange them for the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. Then, I am allowed to capture ingredient. All these arrangements are really coincidental. Bufang chuckled. Personally capturing ingredients was an essential cultivation for a chef. Only by doing so would he be able to have a deeper understanding of the ingredient. Only by doing so would he be able to invest more emotions into the ingredients and cook more delicious dishes. Bufang had always been clear that the system was only a support. It only opened the door to the path of the god of cooking for him. If he wanted to truly become the god of cooking at the top of the food chain in this fantasy world, Bufang still needed to work hard. Practicing his knife skills and practicing his carving skills were all for that goal. After calming himself down, Bufang regained his expressionless face. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand was spinning rapidly. Then, Bufang's eyes focused and with a thought, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife turned into a wisp of green smoke and entered the mark on Bufang's wrist. Let me first try the new dish unlocked by the system, red braised meat. The red braised meat provided by the system should be extraordinary, Bufang softly muttered as he put away the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. Chapter 84. Bufang also did not expect that the dish to be unlocked this time would actually be red braised meat. He still remembered the red braised spirit pork he tasted in the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Even though Bufang found many flaws in the dish, it was undeniable that the taste of the red braised meat was indeed pretty good. As a chef, it was impossible for Bufang to not have tasted red braised meat before. He was very familiar with the cooking method of red braised meat. However, he was not in a hurry to cook it. Perhaps the red braised meat mentioned by the system would have a different cooking method? Bufang called out the system's description of the red braised meat. Red braised meat cooking method. The cooking method of this red braised meat requires true energy cooking. It tests the host's control of true energy as well as the handling of the ingredients. The meat selected is the meat of the 5th grade spirit beast, the heavenly punishment deer, from the wildlands. Its meat has a rich fragrance, but it is very easy to change its quality. Once the host makes a mistake, the venison meat will become unbearably bitter. The cooking method of the red braised meat provided by the system was indeed not the ordinary cooking method. It actually required true energy cooking. This slightly surprised Bufang. Could it be that all the dishes unlocked in the future would require true energy cooking? Furthermore, the ingredient chosen for this meat was venison instead of the traditional pork. This greatly exceeded Bufang's expectations. Bufang walked in front of the cupboard and pulled it open. Inside was an intact piece of slightly red venison. Perhaps it was because this venison existed in another world. Its skin fat was slightly thicker than that of the venison Bufang had seen before. It was somewhat similar to pork, but the degree of tautness of the two was definitely different. A strange fragrance was emitted from the venison. It was a strange fragrance that would not arouse one's appetite, but it could make one's nose twitch involuntarily to smell it. After taking out the venison and carefully placing it on the chopping board, Bufang thought of something and the pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The kitchen knife spun in his hand for a while, and Bufang used it to scrape the surface of the venison to remove a layer of impurities. Then, he fetched some spring water and soaked the venison. Patting the venison with the back of the knife, Bufang expressionlessly raised the kitchen knife. There was only one important point in processing this Scorpio deer, and that was to be fast. Moreover, the incision had to be smooth so that the fragrance and spiritual energy in the deer meat could coexist peacefully. There would be no collision and the meat would become bitter. It was Bufang's first time using the dragon bone kitchen knife, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of awkwardness. He raised the knife and slashed it down at lightning speed. His meteor knife skill was close to perfection, so it wasn't difficult for him to do this. Da-da-da-da! The crisp sound of the golden dragon bone kitchen knife colliding with the chopping board resounded throughout the kitchen. Soon, the heavenly punishment deer's venison was completely cut into pieces. Every cut was extremely smooth, and the process was almost perfect. The boiling spring water was poured into the large plate with the venison, and the hot water completely covered the venison. Then, Bufang began to prepare other matters. This time, he didn't pour oil into the wok because the venison itself was greasy. If he poured oil into the wok, the different smell of the oil would affect the taste of the dish. Bufang kept the wok dry. When the temperature of the wok reached a degree where it was slightly scalding, he took out the venison that had been blanched with high-temperature spring water. He used his true energy to force the moisture out of each piece of venison before putting them into the wok. When the venison entered the wok, it made a sizzling sound. Waves of rich fragrance continuously emitted from the venison. Bufang wasn't fooled by the fragrance. He took out a piece of brown sugar prepared by the system, crushed it, and turned it into powder. Then, he turned his gaze to the wok. When the venison in the wok seeped out a glossy layer of fat, Bufang sprinkled the brown sugar into it. Then, he took a spatula and began to stir-fry. Bufang's stir-frying was very regular. This was the summary of his experience as a chef. When the brown sugar melted, it turned into a syrup that enveloped every piece of venison. At this moment, the originally white venison also became bright red. The fragrance of the meat had already uncontrollably spread out, enveloping the entire kitchen. After pouring some spring water into the wok, Bufang covered it with a lid. At this moment, he also became serious. The next step was the true energy cooking process. He operated the true energy vortex in his energy center, mobilizing it to surge out and pour it into the wok, wrapping around every piece of venison. The broth in the wok was boiling, causing the venison to rumble and tremble. The venison's skin became as bright as jade, and it was constantly emitting the fragrance of the meat. When a lot of the broth in the wok had evaporated, Bufang retracted his true energy. He opened the lid of the wok and began to continuously stir-fry, causing the increasingly thicker broth to completely cover every piece of venison. After adding salt and a little soy sauce, the aroma of the meat finally stabilized. The aroma of the meat was accompanied by a thick fragrance, which was intertwined with a sweet aroma. Just by smelling this aroma, Bufang felt a little hungry and salivated. Taking out a blue and white porcelain plate, Bufang poured the red braised meat onto the plate. The new dish was also successfully completed. Even though he needed to use true energy to cook, compared to cooking the sage herb phoenix chicken soup last time, Bufang seemed to be more skillful and at ease this time. Perhaps it was because he had made a breakthrough. After carrying the red braised meat out of the kitchen and into the store, Bufang was immediately startled. That was because Blackie was already squatting on the dining table, blinking its doggy eyes as it stared at the red braised meat in Bufang's hands. Its tongue was constantly flicking in and out. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. This lazy dog could not wait to eat the moment it smelled the meat. However, the fragrance of the red braised meat was indeed very tempting, even better than the sweet and sour ribs. Taking out another plate, Bufang placed it in front of Blackie and began to scrutinize the red braised meat. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it red braised venison. It was red, shiny and trembling. White steam rose from the top of the agate-like red braised meat. The venison's skin was rosy, the next layer of fat was white but not greasy, and the last layer of lean meat was crystal clear. It was too beautiful to behold. After picking up a piece for Blackie, Bufang also picked up a piece of red braised venison and put it into his mouth. The fragrance of this dish was very unique. Once the meat entered his mouth, the faint sweetness of the gravy blossomed in his mouth. Immediately after, he involuntarily bit down on the meat's skin. The fragrance of the meat exploded like a bomb and instantly covered his mouth and taste bud. With a sizzling sound, the entire piece of meat entered his stomach. However, the urge to eat another piece rose in his heart. Just like that, Bufang continuously ate half of the plate of venison and was still not satisfied. He simply could not stop. It was as if he had the urge to eat again every time he had not tasted the meat's flavor. Blackie was also gobbling down the meat on the porcelain plate. Its doggy eyes were slightly narrowed, and it was extremely satisfied. The human and dog quickly finished the entire plate of venison. Contentedly curled up on the chair, Bufang exhaled a breath of hot air. Blackie happily returned to the door and comfortably lay down to sleep. Sleeping after eating was indeed Blackie's style. After cooking with true energy, the taste of this venison is simply indescribably good. The fragrance of the heavenly punishment deer and the aroma of the meat have completely fused together, making the taste present an irresistible feeling. Bufang thought of the taste of the red braised meat, and he unconsciously stuck out his tongue to lick his lip. After resting for a while, Bufang placed the plate in the automatic dishwasher and leisurely walked toward his room. It was undeniable that sometimes sleeping after eating was also a kind of happiness. However, just as he walked to the door of his room, the system's voice rang out in his mind once again. Temporary mission. The host is required to prepare for the first capture of ingredients tomorrow. The transfer of ingredients will begin the day after tomorrow. Without experiencing wind and rain, how can you see the rainbow? Young man, use your kitchen knife to conquer all ingredient. Mission reward: rice noodle roll cooking technique. Chapter 85. Last minute mission? The system's voice was still echoing in Bufang's mind. He had a slightly astonished expression on his face. Why did the last-minute mission come so quickly this time? He had only just leveled up and a mission had already appeared. Carrying out the first ingredient hunt. There was only 1 day to prepare. Bufang frowned. Wasn't 1 day a little too rushed? System, the purpose of capturing ingredients is to teleport me to the wildlands, right? Then what about my store? Is it not open for business? Bufang doubtfully asked. The host has a time limit of 2 days to capture ingredient. If the host is unable to capture a suitable ingredient within 2 days, the host will be deemed to have failed the last-minute mission and 10% of the crystal's origin energy conversion rate will be deducted as punishment. During the 2 days of capturing ingredients, the store will be temporarily closed for business, the system said in its usual aloof tone. Bufang nodded. He had gained a better understanding of this last-minute mission. However, he was becoming more and more nervous. If he failed, 10% of the origin energy conversion rate would be deducted. This was practically gouging out the flesh in Bufang's heart. The origin energy conversion rate was extremely important for Bufang to level up. It was not easy for him to raise it to 50%. If 10% was deducted because of a mission failure, then Bufang could only go to the toilet and cry. After yawning, Bufang returned to his room and lay on his bed. Not long after, the sound of rhythmic breathing could be heard. The Crown Prince's palace. The Crown Prince, Ji Chungan, had a gloomy expression as he tightly clenched his fists. His fingernails were almost digging into the flesh of his palms. It was obvious how angry the Crown Prince was at this moment. Ji Qingyu, you actually dared to collude with a foreign sect. You're courting death. Ji Chungan's face was ashen. As he looked at Xushur's withered corpse in the main hall, his eyes were filled with unconcealable sorrow. Xushur had been with him for many years and had always been his most capable subordinate. Now, he was brutally murdered by Ji Qingyu. Even though he did not have any evidence to prove that King Yu was colluding with sects from outside the region, anyone with a discerning eye would know that King Yu was the only one who would go and ruin the soup at that time. Ji Qingyu, oh Ji Qingyu, you claim to be meticulous in your calculations, but this time you still made a big mistake. Even I could guess that you colluded with the sects from the outer domain. With Father's wisdom, how could he not know? Do you really think that Imperial Father is senile? A mocking smile suddenly appeared on the Crown Prince's gloomy face, and the pleasure in his eyes became even more intense. Just as I said, you're courting death. The Crown Prince's cold laughter echoed throughout the Crown Prince Palace. It was filled with suppressed anger and killing intent. King Yu's manner. King Yu was sitting on a sandalwood chair with one of his legs crossed. His slender palm lightly patted on his knee as he calmly gazed into the distance. His expression was very calm and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. However, it was precisely this calmness that made others feel even more terrified. At the entrance, a hunched figure trembled as he walked in. His body was trembling as if he was on the verge of collapsing, as if a gust of wind could knock him over. Han Qinyun's aura was extremely dispirited, and had almost fallen to the level of a 5th-grade battle king. It was obvious that the secret technique he used to escape this time had greatly injured his body. This old man greets King Yu. Han Qinyun seemed to have become even skinnier, to the point that he was practically a bag of bones. The 2 lumps of spirit fire in his eye sockets had also become extremely dim. TSK, It seems like our soul sex head elder's injuries aren't light. It's as if I could crush his bones with a single finger. The corner of King Yu's mouth curled up as he playfully looked at Han Qianyun, who was below the steps. He raised a finger and lightly gestured. The spirit fire in Han Qianyun's eye sockets trembled and his body slightly tensed up. A faint layer of pitch-black true energy hovered around his body. What is the meaning of this, King Yu? Even though this old man is heavily injured, I've already perfectly completed my mission. King Yu wouldn't go so far as to burn the bridge after crossing it, right? King Yu gave him a glance and simply said, "That's right. You've completed your mission, but you've also left me with a big problem. Don't you know? I only needed you to destroy that sage herb phoenix chicken soup. After you killed the Crown Prince's men, destroy their corpses and don't leave behind any traces. However, why did you provoke that mysterious store?" King Yu's tone suddenly became cold. He stood up from his chair and his tall and straight figure suddenly emitted an oppressive aura. This was the oppressive aura of a person of high status as it pressed toward Han Qianyun. Han Qianyun inwardly sighed. King Yu was indeed King Yu, as expected of Emperor Chongfeng's son. Even though his strength was inferior to his, the oppressive aura he gave off was not the slightest bit weaker. However, Han Qianyun was actually not too worried. King Yu might not dare to shed all pretenses of cordiality with his soul sect, so King Yu might not dare to kill him. As expected, King Yu's oppressive aura quickly dissipated as he indifferently glanced at Han Qianyun. "I'll let you off this time. As the saying goes, things don't happen more than 3 times. If you mess up the next mission, it won't be as simple as getting sent back to the soul sect." King Yu stood with his hands behind his back as he indifferently said. A wave of true energy coiled around his body, and it felt as if even the air was about to collapse. Han Qianyun took a deep breath. King Yu's cultivation level had already reached the peak of 5th grade Battle King, and was only a step away from reaching 6th grade Battle Emperor. Han Qianyun retreated, and King Yu was the only one left in the main hall. He raised his hand and a ball of true energy hovered in the air. Then, he abruptly crushed it. "My dear elder brother, you must be feeling pleased with yourself for discovering my weakness right now. However, so what? If Father really wants to execute me, then as his son, I can only resist." As Xiao Meng walked out of the gate of heavenly mystery, he turned around to glance at the majestic main hall and helplessly sighed. Even someone as wild and unruly as Emperor Chongfeng was defeated by time in the end. After waging war against the sects for over 100 years, his own son ended up colluding with the sects to crush his last hope of surviving. It was truly ironic. Without becoming a supreme being, one is still a mortal. Xiao Meng had a solemn expression on his face as his blade-like eyebrows tightly knitted together. With a light sigh, he flicked his sleeves and left. Within the main hall, the elderly emperor was constantly coughing as he sat on the dragon throne. His aura was becoming increasingly dispirited, and there seemed to be an aura of death on his face. Lian Fu's face was filled with worry as he looked at the emperor. His face was also filled with sorrow. "Your Majesty, why don't this old servant call the imperial physician over to take a look?" Lian Fu asked. The emperor waved his hand. Even his gaze was a little turbid, but his domineering aura did not diminish in the slightest. "My lifelong wish is to wipe out the sects and restore peace to the empire. The existence of the sects is ultimately a hidden danger," the emperor said in a hoarse voice. There was no joy or sorrow in his tone. "Now, my good son is actually colluding with the sects for the sake of the throne. Isn't this extremely ironic? My old face feels like it's on fire." Lian Fu did not say anything. He respectfully stood to the side with a solemn expression. The emperor shakily stood up and chuckled. His hoarse laughter echoed within the main hall of the imperial palace. "I am Emperor Chongfeng, an emperor who wiped out hundreds of sections. Even if I am past my prime, I cannot allow my own son to slap me in the face like this. As a son, he should show his father the respect he deserves. He will understand very soon." His calm voice contained a hint of arrogance and confidence as it echoed within the main hall before gradually dissipating. Lien Fu's expression became even more respectful as he bowed and watched the emperor's disappearing figure. The next day, early morning, Bufang was open for business as usual. However, he had to inform Xiaoyi that he would be suspending business for 2 days. This was to prevent her from foolishly coming over and getting the door slammed in her face. Fatty Jean and the others arrived in a grandiose manner, causing the quiet store to become a little livelier. Fatty Jin's eyes were sharp, and when he discovered the new dish, red braised meat, his eyes immediately lit up. "Owner Bu, this new dish is a little expensive. It actually costs 100 crystals. This is really not cheap." The price of the red braised meat slightly dampened Fatty Jin's enthusiasm. After all, even though he was a nouveau riche, even a nouveau riche would feel the pinch if he had to pay a few hundred crystals a day. "The new dish won't disappoint you. Trust me," Bufang expressionlessly said. Fatty Jean squinted at Bufang for a long time before finally slamming the table and ordering the red braised meat. The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up as he turned around and entered the kitchen. When he carried the fragrant red braised meat out of the kitchen, Xiaoyi had already arrived at the store. At the same time, an old and familiar figure slowly stepped into the store. "Owner Bu, the words on your board are not as good as mine," the old man said with a chuckle. Chapter 86. The elder who stepped into the store was none other than the current emperor, Ji Changfeng. Ji Changfeng's complexion was slightly pale, and he looked extremely frail. He was like an old man with one foot in the grave, and completely lacked the domineering aura of an emperor. The words on the signboard hanging at the entrance seemed to have been carved out of a mold. "It lacks spirit energy and is extremely awkward. Even though it looks good, it can't stand up to my calligraphy." The emperor clasped his hands behind his back and said to Bufang with a chuckle. Bufang raised his eyebrows. It wasn't strange for the emperor to come to his store, but for him to come so early was out of his expectations. The signboard at the entrance was provided by the system. Back then, Bufang rejected the emperor's nomination because the system said it could provide it. Now that he looked at it, it didn't seem like much. "System, the emperor said that the words on the signboard you obtained are poorly written," Bufang said to the system. The reply he got was a moment of silence. Then, the system's solemn voice rang out. The words on the signboard were copied from the template of the number 1 calligrapher in the Light Wind Empire. There are no problems. As for the lack of spirit energy, the system is unable to provide an answer. Bufang nodded. The signboard obtained by the system was definitely not an ordinary item. However, perhaps because the words were copied, it was normal for it to lack spirit energy. "Your Majesty, what do you want to eat today?" Bufang expressionlessly asked, no longer thinking about these questions. The emperor found a table and sat down. He waved his hand and said, "There's no hurry. I have some doubts that I need you to answer." What doubts?" Bufang calmly asked. "If I don't ask these questions now, I'm afraid I won't have the chance to." The emperor's body slightly trembled. He lightly coughed and then raised his head. His cloudy eyes solemnly looked at Bufang and said, "You have a supreme spirit beast and a puppet comparable to a 7th-grade battle saint. You can also cook dishes filled with spirit energy. Owner Bu, who exactly are you? What is your purpose for staying in the imperial city of my Light Wind Empire?" Bufang raised his eyebrows slightly and looked calmly at the emperor. Their gazes collided silently in the air. After a long time, Bufang said expressionlessly, "I don't have any motives. I just want to open a small restaurant." The emperor's face stiffened. He shook his head with a bitter smile. "Impossible. The strength of your store is already comparable to the entire Light Wind Empire. How could you open a store just for the sake of opening a store? I won't force you to tell me if you don't want to, but I hope you can answer my last question properly. Go ahead, Bufang said. You're not a member of a sect, right? You wouldn't do anything that would threaten the empire, would you? The emperor covered his chest, coughed lightly, and raised his head to ask. This was the main reason why he had come today. As an emperor, even if he was about to decay, he could not tolerate an uncontrollable variable in his empire. However, with the existence of a supreme spirit beast, the emperor did not have the slightest confidence that he could destroy the store. Therefore, he could only settle for the next best thing, which was to clarify the purpose of the store's existence in order to feel at ease. However, in reality, Bufang only wanted to open a store in the imperial city of the Light Wind Empire. He wanted to keep a low profile and earn crystals. He wanted to raise his cultivation level and become the god of cooking that stood at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world. His goal was that simple. Don't worry, it won't happen, Bufang solemnly replied to the emperor as the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing a stiff smile. The emperor was startled. Then, a smile appeared on his wrinkled face, which then turned into a hearty laugh. Owner Bu, with your words, I feel much more at ease. I'm very happy today. Give me a portion of all the dishes. This might be the last time I eat at Owner Bu's place. After the emperor finished laughing, he took a deep breath and clapped his hands. Outside the door, Lian Fu, who was wearing an embroidered robe, walked in with his thumb and middle finger pinched. He respectfully stood behind the emperor with a worried look in his eyes. Bufang nodded his head and then stepped into the kitchen. Not long after, a rich aroma wafted out from the kitchen. The aroma caused the emperor to narrow his eyes and become slightly intoxicated. After living for so many years and eating so many delicacies, it's still Owner Bu's dishes that are the most intoxicating. Unfortunately, I only met Owner Bu in my final moments. I don't know if this is a punishment or a reward from the heavens, the emperor softly muttered. Xiaoyi obediently carried the dishes up and placed them in front of the emperor. The emperor chuckled as he rubbed Xiaoyi's head with a doting look on his face. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Lian Fu followed behind the emperor and left. Bufang stood at the entrance and softly sighed as he looked at the emperor's aged back. Xiaoyi, you don't have to come to the store for the next 2 days. I need to go out and take care of some matters, so I have to suspend business for 2 days. After today's opening hours, Bufang expressionlessly patted Ouyang Xiaoyi's head and said, Ah, smelly boss, you're going to look for trouble at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant again? Ouyang Xiaoyi excitedly raised her head. Her bright eyes were filled with excitement. Bufang's expression slightly darkened. Who told you that I'm going to look for trouble just because I'm temporarily suspending business? I have important matters to take care of in the next 2 days. Sigh. Alright then, if Smelly Boss is going to look for trouble at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant again, you must call me along. You were simply too cool when you slapped the owner of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant in the face. Ouyang Xiaoyi narrowed her crescent moon-like eyes as she waved her little fist and said with a smile, I was merely stating the truth. There's no such thing as slapping the owner of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant in the face. Just nice, you can take advantage of these 2 days to properly cultivate. I hope that your strength will increase when you return. The dishes in the future will have a higher requirement for your strength, Bufang said. When the topic of cultivation was brought up, Ouyang Xiaoyi's eyes lit up. She seemed to be showing off as she stretched out her fair and tender palm and said, Smelly boss, look, my cultivation has already reached the intermediate stage of 3rd grade battle maniac. Bufang glanced at Ouyang Xiaoyi's smug expression and expressionlessly said, That fast? Even after eating so many dishes filled with spirit energy in the store, your cultivation speed is still so slow. This means that you've been slacking off. Look at me, I'm already a 4th grade battle spirit. Smelly boss, you're really annoying. Forget it, I'm going back to the mansion, humph. Ouyang Xiaoyi snappily snorted and angrily left the store. After Ouyang Xiaoyi left, Bufang squatted in front of Blackie and stroked its smooth and untainted fur. He simply said, "Lazy dog, I won't be in the store for the next 2 days. You should take care of your own meals." Blackie lazily opened its doggy eyes. When it heard Bufang's words, it immediately snorted and rolled its doggy eyes. Bufang returned to the store and closed the door. Then, he took out a wooden board with the words, "Business suspended," written on it and hung it on the door before returning to the kitchen. "System, I have to find the ingredients myself in the wildland. Are you going to provide seasoning ingredients?" Bufang asked. "No," the system coldly replied. Bufang seemed to have already expected the system's answer. He softly replied with an "oh." Then, he found a piece of cloth and threw the salt, soy sauce, pepper, and other ingredients in the kitchen into it. At the same time, he picked up a large wok filled with kitchen knives, spatulas, and the like. He was going to pack it up as well. The system. The purpose of heading to the wildlands is to capture ingredients, not to have a picnic. The host, please determine the main content of the mission. Seasoning ingredients can be brought along, but cooking utensils, other than the god of cooking set, cannot be brought along, the system solemnly said. Bufang, who was excitedly packing, suddenly froze. Then, he expressionlessly sighed. "Don't I have to cook the ingredients after capturing them? Without cooking utensils, how can I bring out the deliciousness of the ingredients to the fullest?" This time, the system was too lazy to answer Bufang's question. In the end, Bufang only stuffed a few seasoning ingredients into his bag. Then, he returned to his room to catch up on his sleep. On the second day, when the morning star had just jumped out of the horizon and released its first ray of light, Bufang was woken up by the system's beep. "Host, please pay attention. The teleportation array will open in 5 minutes. Please prepare for the teleportation." Bufang was startled. He raised his head and discovered that a speck of light had suddenly appeared above his head. That speck of light was rapidly drawing a mysterious magic array. Chapter 87. The Hidden Dragon Continent was vast and boundless. There were mountains that towered into the clouds, mountains that stretched for tens of thousands of miles, vast oceans, and great swamps that were shrouded in miasma. The Wildlands was located outside the borders of the Light Wind Empire of the Hidden Dragon Continent. It was a vast and desolate plain. There were large forests and large lakes on the plain. However, these were not the main points. The reason why the Wildlands was called the Wildlands was because there were countless spirit beasts living on this vast plain. Some of these spirit beasts were strong, some were weak, and they were unevenly matched. The Wildlands was divided into 3 layers. They were like 3 large circles circling around the periphery, the inner layer, and the center. The strength of the spirit beasts distributed in each area was different. The closer one was to the center, the stronger the spirit beasts. It was rumored that there were even 9th-grade supreme beasts in the center of the Wildlands. Therefore, the center of the Wildlands was also known as the Forbidden Zone for humans. Even a 7th-grade battle saint would not have the guts to set foot there. In front of a 9th-grade supreme beast, a human 7th-grade battle saint was as weak as an ant. The periphery of the Wildlands. A series of explosions rang out and a hurricane suddenly howled, causing the surrounding trees to bend continuously. 3 figures sped through the forest at a rapid speed. Tyrannical true energy continuously spread out. Amidst the whistling sounds, 2 figures sped out and surrounded the spirit beast in front of them. Their target was the spirit beast that was constantly escaping. The spirit beast was extremely fast, and the aura on its body was also incomparably powerful. It was actually a 6th-grade spirit beast. Lightning constantly flickered on its body and crackled as it sped through the air. It even caused the air to emit a burning smell. Second brother, the Thunderfire Spirit Pig's speed has slowed down. Don't let it escape. A clear and melodious shout rang out. Then, a stream of true energy shot out and smashed toward the Thunderfire Spirit Pig that was galloping ahead. With a roar, the Thunderfire Spirit Pig's speed became even faster. It directly crashed into a big tree and broke it. Lightning jumped out and directly burned the broken tree. A green-robed man with long, flowing hair stood on a flying sword and whistled over. He looked at the Thunderfire Spirit Pig in the distance with a faint smile and said, "Junior sister, don't worry. Although this Thunderfire Spirit Pig is a rank 6 spirit beast, its strength lies in its defense. Its combat strength, speed, and endurance are both very weak. It will obediently stop very soon." Beside the green-robed man, there was a cute girl blinking her big eyes, excitedly staring at the Thunderfire Spirit Pig. There was a smile on her face, and there were 2 cute dimples at the corners of her mouth. Suddenly, the green-robed man was taken aback and looked into the distance in confusion. The Thunderfire Spirit Pig's galloping figure suddenly came to a halt. In front of the Spirit Pig, the void suddenly distorted, and then burst forth into a tornado that soared into the sky. Specks of light flickered within the tornado. Bang! With a loud explosion, the tornado suddenly dispersed. A tall and slender figure appeared in the magic array formed by the specks of light. The Thunderfire Spirit Pig angrily roared and continued to charge toward the slender figure that suddenly appeared. After all, it was a rank 6 spirit beast. Even if its combat strength was not strong, the impact of such a charge was still very considerable. What the hell is that? The slender figure did not seem to have recovered. He raised his head and noticed a pig ferociously charging toward him. He immediately raised his eyebrows and indifferently spat out a sentence. "Be careful." Even though the green-robed man did not know why the slender young man had appeared, he still kindly warned him. The dimpled girl following behind the green-robed man was also frightened to the point that her beautiful face turned pale. She covered her eyes with her small hands and did not dare to watch the tragic scene that was about to unfold. The green-robed man also did not expect that someone would suddenly appear in front of the Thunderfire Spirit Pig. Even though the Thunderfire Spirit Pig's combat strength was not strong, its defense was extremely terrifying. Its skin was coarse and its flesh was thick. Even a battle emperor would vomit blood from the impact, and an average person would be directly trampled into minced meat. However, the scene that happened in the next moment caused the green-robed man's expression to suddenly stiffen. His eyes burst forth with a look of disbelief. Facing the Thunderfire Spirit Pig that was charging toward him, the young man did not seem to be afraid at all. The expression on his face did not change, and his eyes were as calm as water. An unassuming kitchen knife appeared in the young man's hand. Damn! Facing the Thunderfire Spirit Pig's charge, why the hell did you take out a kitchen knife? This was the green-robed man's first thought when he saw the kitchen knife. However, what happened was completely out of his expectations. The ferocious Thunderfire Spirit Pig did not slow down at all. As for the young man who was holding the unassuming kitchen knife, his true energy burst forth, and the kitchen knife actually burst forth with boundless golden light. The green-robed man was unable to open his eyes due to the dazzling golden light. When the gold light dissipated, everything returned to a state of tranquility. The green-robed man watched the scene on the field, and his mouth slightly opened. His face was filled with shock and seriousness. The young girl beside him also let out a delicate cry as her eyes widened even more. The Thunderfire Spirit Pig was actually cleaved into 2 halves. Its huge body fell onto the ground and fresh blood splattered all over the ground. Faint lightning arcs were still pulsating within the blood. The young man put away the unassuming kitchen knife and carried a bag on his back. He walked toward the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig and crouched down, as if he was examining the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig's carcass. The green-robed man and the young girl hurriedly descended, and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Killing the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig, which was known for its defensive power, with a single slash, there was no doubt that the person in front of them was definitely a powerful warrior. He might even be a 7th-grade battle saint. Say, Senior, you have great skills. Killing the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig with a single slash, truly domineering. The green-robed man had a smile on his face as he said to the young man who was examining the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig's carcass. The young man expressionlessly raised his head and glanced at the green-robed man and the young girl with dimples behind him. He lightly nodded his head and stood up. The meat of the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig contains lightning arcs and fire bursts. It can be considered a pretty good ingredient. Unfortunately, it's still a little lacking compared to the ingredient that I'm looking for, the young man muttered. However, his words were like a thunderclap in the green-robed man's ears. Damn! He's indeed an expert. Even the 6th-grade Thunder Fire Spirit Pig did not catch his eye. Could it be that he came for a 7th-grade spirit beast? What are your names? Why are you here? The young man asked the green-robed man with an expressionless face. Senior, I am Tang Yin, a disciple of the Celestial Arcanum sect. This is my junior sister, Lu Xiaoxiao. May I ask for Senior's name? Tang Yin respectfully said. Even though he had some doubts in his heart, because he was observing the young man from a close distance, he noticed that the true energy fluctuations on the young man's body were not strong. It was roughly around the level of a 4th-grade battle spirit. A 4th-grade battle spirit. How could someone with this level of cultivation dare to appear in the wildlands? It was obvious that the young man in front of him, who was able to kill a 6th-grade spirit beast with a kitchen knife, was definitely not a 4th-grade battle spirit. Oh, my name is Bufang, I'm a chef. I come from, the Light Wind Empire. Bufang also earnestly introduced himself. Chef? You King introduced yourself as a chef? A strange expression appeared on Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao's faces. Fine. The hobbies of the strong were indeed hard to guess. Just like their master, the 3rd elder of the Celestial Arcanum sect, didn't he also like to spend his days in the kitchen studying recipes? Senior, I wonder if you can sell this Thunder Fire Spirit Pig to me. The reason why we came to the wildlands to train is for this Thunder Fire Spirit Pig. Tang Yin cupped his hands toward Bufang and said. Bufang was startled for a moment. He glanced at the two halves of the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig on the ground and curled up the corners of his mouth. I'll give it to you guys. Since I have no use for this ingredient, the meat of the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig should have no other use besides cooking. Could it be that you guys are chefs as well? Tang Yin's pupils slightly constricted as a sense of admiration suddenly welled up in his heart. As expected of a senior, he could actually see through the reason why they were collecting the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig. That's right. This time, they were here to collect ingredients for their master. Regardless of whether you guys are chefs or not, I just happen to have a question for you. Bufang raised his gaze and interrupted Tang Yin, who was about to speak, and simply said, Do you guys know if there are any ingredients that are of a higher grade than this Thunder Fire Spirit Pig? Chapter 88. Bufang's question was somewhat out of Tang Yin's expectations. That was because Bufang's question did not have any common sense. The Thunder Fire Spirit Pig was a 6th-grade spirit beast. It was already considered the top-notch spirit beast in the outskirts of the wildlands. Relatively speaking, it was also the highest-grade ingredient. If they wanted to find and capture an ingredient of higher quality than the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig, they could only continue forward and step into the inner layer of the wildlands. The inner layer of the wildlands was an extremely dangerous place for them. Tang Yin was a 6th-grade battle emperor, while Lu Xiaoxiao was only a 5th-grade battle king. If they were to step into the inner layer with their current strength, once they encountered a powerful spirit beast, their chances of survival would be extremely slim. That was because in the inner layer, the weakest spirit beast was at the 6th grade. 7th grade and even 8th grade spirit beasts could occasionally be encountered. When Bu Fong saw the change in Tang Yin's expression, his heart slightly shook. It was obvious that Tang Yin knew where to find ingredients of higher quality. Tell me the information about the ingredient or bring me there. I can cook for you guys for free, Bu Fong seriously said. The corners of Tang Yin's mouth twitched. He did not take it seriously. If it was not for the might of Bu Fong killing the Thunderfire Spirit Pig with a single slash, he would have already dragged Lu Xiaoxiao away. Bringing Bu Fong to the inner layer was risking his life. Could the food he cooked be more precious than his life? Just as Tang Yin was hesitating, Lu Xiaoxiao glanced at her senior brother and suddenly said, "Second brother, isn't there a spirit beast in the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix? Master told us to test it out if we have the ability. If we don't, we should choose the Thunderfire Spirit Pig. That spirit beast should be an ingredient of a higher grade than the Thunderfire Spirit Pig, right?" Lu Xiaoxiao's eyes curved and charming dimples appeared on the corners of her mouth. Her smile was extremely cute. Tang Yin frowned and his gaze fell on his junior sister. He did not expect Lu Xiaoxiao to mention the spirit beast in the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix at this time. A spirit beast of a higher grade than the Thunderfire Spirit Pig? Sure, bring me there, Bu Fong expressionlessly said. Tang Yin wanted to explain something, but just as the words were about to leave his mouth, Lu Xiaoxiao hugged his arm and pulled him forward. "Second brother, Senior is so strong. He can help us kill that spirit beast. Without that spirit beast, we will be able to harvest the Phoenix Blood Herb in the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix. This way we can complete Master's task." Lu Xiaoxiao whispered to Tang Yin. "Isn't this using Senior? This won't do. We have to clearly explain this to Senior." Tang Yin frowned and unhappily glanced at his mischievous junior sister. "Second brother, what if we tell the truth and Senior refuses to go? Won't we fail our mission then? In any case, Senior is also looking for a high-grade ingredient. That spirit beast is indeed of a higher grade than the Thunderfire Spirit Pig." Lu Xiaoxiao immediately became anxious as she pulled Tang Yin forward. Tang Yin was stunned as well. He could not help but feel a little hesitant. In the end, he sighed and said, "When the time comes, we'll have to do our best to help you get rid of that spirit beast. Yes, that's a must." When Lu Xiaoxiao heard Tang Yin agree, she immediately smiled happily as her charming dimples appeared once again. Bu Fong was naturally unaware of their conversation. He carried his backpack and followed behind the two of them. The corpse of the Thunderfire Spirit Pig had already been stored away by Tang Yin. He probably had a spatial spirit tool on him because he simply waved his hand at the spirit pig's corpse and stored it away. "Senior, the location of that spirit beast is in the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix. That valley might be quite a distance away from here. It seems like we'll have to travel through the night," Tang Yin said to Bu Fong. Bu Fong expressionlessly nodded. "It's fine as long as we can reach there by noon tomorrow." The system gave Bu Fong 2 days to gather ingredient. According to Tang Yin, Bu Fong was not in a hurry. Just like that, the three of them walked through the dense forest. This forest was extremely vast in the wildland. From time to time, a few 3rd and 4th grade spirit beasts would appear. Tang Yin would directly kill these spirit beasts without needing Bu Fong to do anything. After walking for a while, the three of them finally walked out of the dense forest. Then, they were faced with a stone forest. Densely packed gravel was scattered all over this wasteland. After crossing this stone forest, we'll almost reach the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix. "Senior, why don't we rest here for the night?" Tang Yin said to Bu Fong with a smile. Lu Xiaoxiao also hurriedly said, that's right. Senior, let's rest. I'm so tired. The wildlands at night is very dangerous. Even though Senior is powerful, for the sake of safety, let's rest for the night first and continue on our journey tomorrow. Bufang raised his head and looked at the dark sky. He nodded his head and said, "Then let's rest for the night. I promised that I would cook for you guys if I lead the way. First, bring me a piece of Thunderfire Spirit Pig's spine meat." The three of them found a spot. It was quite tranquil under the cover of a large boulder. Bufang went into the forest and picked up some dry firewood. He said to Tang Yin, "You know how to start a fire, right?" Tang Yin was stunned for a moment. This Senior couldn't really be planning to cook for them, right? He always thought that Bufang was only joking with them. He didn't expect that Bufang would actually make a move. Lu Xiaoxiao was also slightly stunned. Then, she couldn't help but feel a little suspicious. This Senior, could he really be a chef? He couldn't be an unreliable chef like her master, right? Start a fire and give me the Thunderfire Spirit Pig's spine meat. I need to process it, Bufang expressionlessly said. Tang Yin hurriedly took out a piece of Thunderfire Spirit Pig's spine meat from his spatial spirit tool and handed it to Bufang. Bufang took the piece of spine meat and found a rock. He used true energy to clean the surface of the rock until it was spotless. Then, he took out a gourd and poured out the alpine spring water prepared by the system to wash the Thunderfire Spirit Pig's spine meat. He washed away all the bloodstains and allowed the spirit energy of the spirit spring water to seep into the surface of the pork. After the true energy enveloped the spirit pork and evaporated all the water stains on the surface, Bufang waved his hand and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The pitch-black kitchen knife spun a few times in his palm. Then, under Bufang's control, it cut the spirit pork into 3 large chunks. Lu Xiaoxiao stared at Bufang with a dumbfounded expression. Her mind was replaying the scene of Bufang's gorgeous and dazzling knife skills. She was a little confused. Could it be that this Senior was really a professional chef? In the distance, Tang Yin had already started the fire. For a 6th-grade battle emperor, starting a fire was really overkill. Bufang took out a tree branch. One end of the branch was sharpened by Bufang, and the branch was still emitting a strange fragrance. After skewering the pork chunks on the tree branch, Bufang set up a grill on top of the fire that Tang Yin had started. He placed the pork on top of the grill and slowly roasted it. 3 pieces of pork were skewered on the 3 tree branches and neatly placed on the grill to be roasted by the flames. "Senior, your movements are really skillful, just like a chef," Tang Yin said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that Bufang was really planning to cook a delicacy for them. Bufang raised his head and gave him a glance. He simply said, "I am a chef." After saying that, Bufang took out bottles of seasoning ingredients from his bag. Salt, pepper, cumin powder, and so on. Looking at all these bottles and jars, Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao were completely speechless. "So you're really a chef?" Senior is indeed a senior. Coming to the wildlands is like having a picnic. Even the seasoning ingredients are so well prepared, Lu Xiaoxiao said with a dry laugh. This time, Bufang did not even raise his head. He simply said, "If it wasn't for the fact that I wasn't allowed to, I might have even brought pots and pans. When the time comes, I would be able to cook an even better delicacy. You guys are out of luck." Lu Xiaoxiao. Tang Yin. For a moment they were somewhat speechless. The surroundings became quiet, and only the sound of the firewood burning under the flames could be heard. Amidst this terrifying silence, a rich meaty aroma quickly lingered in the air. Chapter 89. The spine meat of the Thunderfire Spirit Pig was skewered on an unknown tree branch and was being roasted above the flames. As the temperature rose, the tree branch would emit an alluring aroma. The aroma was not like the aroma of meat, but more like the aroma of fresh fruit. It was bewitching. The pork gradually gained an alluring rosy color as it was being roasted by the flames. The oily juice quickly seeped out from the surface of the roasted meat, and faint lightning arcs constantly leaped on the surface of the roasted meat. Bufang skillfully rotated the roasted meat so that every part of it could receive heat evenly. This was a test of a chef's ability to control the heat. Roasting meat looked simple, but there were many small tricks involved. The meat of the Thunderfire Spirit Pig was the meat of a 6th-grade spirit beast, so ordinary flames were naturally unable to roast it. Therefore, Bufang had to constantly inject his true energy into the flames. In fact, this could also be considered as a method of cooking with true energy. As the roasting time increased, a rich aroma of meat wafted out from the roasting rack and drifted into the stone forest. Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao swallowed their saliva at the same time. Their gazes involuntarily drifted toward the roasted meat. The roasted meat that was roasted by Bufang until it was incomparably rosy and was glistening with oily juice. It was as if it was emitting a great charm. "It smells really good," Tang Yin could not help but praise. The meat was mellow and not greasy. It was even mixed with a faint fruity aroma, giving people a feeling of being intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves. Lu Xiaoxiao had been staring at the roasted meat for a long time, and her eyes could not tear away. They had been training in the Celestial Arcanum sect for many years, and had never smelled such a rich aroma of meat. Within the sect, experts who had reached the 5th-grade Battle King realm would usually choose to abstain from eating. Their need for food was already extremely small. Bufang expressionlessly rotated the roasted meat. When he saw the oily juice of the roasted meat start to drip down, he sprinkled some seasoning on it. The aroma of the meat immediately became even more rich and colorful. After removing 2 skewers of roasted meat, Bufang handed them to Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao, indicating that they could start tasting. "Bu's secret recipe barbecue, please enjoy," Bufang said expressionlessly. Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao were about to drool. Smelling the aroma of the barbecued meat at such a close distance stirred up the hunger in their stomach. They couldn't wait to have a taste. "Thank you, Senior." Tang Yin still had a lot of self-control. After thanking Bufang, he narrowed his eyes and took a bite of the roasted meat. Although Lu Xiaoxiao was a woman, her table manners weren't as refined as Tang Yin's. When Tang Yin took the first bite, her mouth was already stuffed with roasted meat. "Oh, hot, hot." Lu Xiaoxiao's cheeks puffed up and her eyes widened. She grabbed the roasted meat tightly with one hand and fanned her cheeks with the other. Tang Yin took a bite of the roasted meat. The moment his teeth came into contact with the roasted meat, a rich aroma rushed into his mouth. The meat was surprisingly soft and tender. It wasn't as dry and hard as roasted meat should be. Once it entered his mouth, the oily juice seeped out and stained his lips. From afar, it looked like he had smeared a layer of lipstick. As the roasted meat was chewed in his mouth, the rich and oily roasted meat covered Tang Yin's tongue. A faint numbing sensation was emitted from the meat and stimulated his mouth. It gave him goosebumps all over his body. After swallowing the roasted meat, the numbing sensation flowed down his throat all the way to his stomach. It was as if his entire body was cleansed. It was so comfortable that he couldn't help but want to moan. How could there be such an unbelievable delicacy in this world? I didn't know that the meat of the Thunderfire Spirit Pig could actually be this delicious. Tang Yin almost had the urge to cry. This was the first time in his life that he had eaten a delicacy that moved him so much. Beside him, Lu Xiaoxiao was already unable to stop eating. The rims of her eyes were completely red. It was obvious that she was also moved by the delicacy. As the disciples of the Celestial Arcanum sect, the leader of the 10 great sects in the outer domain, they had to undergo arduous training since they were young. Their 3 meals a day were mostly porridge and steamed buns. After eating this for more than 10 years, when their cultivation broke through to the 5th grade, most of them chose to abstain from eating. Therefore, they had no concept of delicacies at all. This was the first time they had eaten the roasted meat cooked by Bufang. For them, it was simply an indescribable shock. It was a delicacy that was able to enter their hearts. Bufang expressionlessly looked at the two of them, who simply couldn't stop eating. The corners of his mouth curled up. He also took the last skewer of roasted meat and began to savor it in a leisurely manner. As he ate, he was also trying to find the flaws in the roasted meat. Clap, clap, clap. The aroma of the roasted meat was blown by the wind and gradually spread to the surroundings. In this wildlands, the aroma of the roasted meat was simply a refreshing stream. It caused many spirit beasts to subconsciously follow the scent and approach it. On top of a craggy boulder, a cheetah-like demonic beast whose eyes were emitting a dark green radiance in the dark night stared malevolently in the direction of Bufang and the others. It was drooling ferociously. There were also the auras of a few powerful spirit beasts nearby that were rapidly approaching. Not only was the aroma of the roasted meat a type of temptation for humans, it was obviously a type of irresistible delicacy for spirit beasts as well. Tang Yin took a bite of the roasted meat and swallowed it with a slurping sound. He stood up with a face full of enjoyment. Senior's culinary skills are simply astonishing. Let me go and clean up these little things in the surroundings so that they don't affect Senior's mood. Tang Yin held the roasted meat in one hand and drew his longsword with the other. The sharp longsword emitted a cold glint that made one's scalp go numb. Bufang was expressionless as he ate his roasted meat and pondered about the flaws in it. Lu Xiaoxiao was also completely focused on dealing with the roasted meat. When Tang Yin realized that no one was responding to him, he suddenly felt very embarrassed. He grinned and tore a mouthful of roasted meat. With a chuckle, the true energy in his body suddenly burst forth and engulfed his body like a long dragon. Ha 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 ha! In ancient times, there were chivalrous men who drank wine and slew demons. Now I, Tang Yin, eat meat and slaughter beasts. How delightful! Tang Yin's figure instantly charged into the midst of the numerous spirit beasts that were galloping toward him. These spirit beasts that were attracted by the aroma of the roasted meat were all around the 5th grade. They were all overlords of their own territories. If it wasn't for the temptation of the roasted meat, they probably wouldn't have left their own territories. As the sword flashed, Tang Yin wore a green robe. As his sleeves fluttered in the wind, he leisurely wandered among the numerous spirit beasts and occasionally tore a mouthful of roasted meat. He was killing to his heart's content and was extremely carefree. Of course, the scene of eating roasted meat while battling spirit beasts was a little weird. After the battle, Tang Yin returned with the roasted meat in one hand and the sword in the other. There were still traces of blood flowing on the ice-cold longsword, but Tang Yin's expression didn't change as he ate the roasted meat. His face was filled with an indescribable satisfaction that was mixed with a trace of disbelief and shock. "Senior, the spirit beasts have all been taken care of," Tang Yin said with a smile. Bufang nodded and placed the last piece of roasted meat into his mouth, slowly chewing it. "Senior, can this roasted meat of yours replenish spirit energy? I fought 4 5th-grade spirit beasts alone, but not only did I not feel like my true chi was being exhausted, it was even getting stronger the more I fought. My true chi was almost boiling." Tang Yin took a deep breath and asked solemnly. In the distance, Lu Xiaoxiao ate with a face full of enjoyment. She rubbed her bulging belly and exhaled a breath of hot air, intending to rest. However, in the next moment, her eyes widened in disbelief as she glanced at Tang Yin in astonishment. Then, she sat down cross-legged and rich true energy surged out from her body. She had actually entered a state of cultivation. Here, as you can see, this roasted meat can provide you with enough true energy. Don't make a fuss, this is only an ordinary true energy delicacy. If you still want to taste this delicacy, you can go to the imperial city of the Light Wind Empire and look for Fong Fong's little store. Bufang simply said and conveniently advertised his store. Light Wind Empire, Fong Fong's little store. Tang Yin narrowed his eyes and solemnly nodded. A dish comparable to a fifth-grade elixir, senior, is indeed unfathomable. Then, after finishing the roasted meat, Tang Yin also sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate. Due to the system, the true energy within the delicacies was extracted by Bufang, so he found a place to sleep. The night passed uneventfully. At daybreak the next day, the three of them set off for the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix. After passing through the stone forest, the scenery in front of them quickly changed. Verdant and lush, the gurgling of water, and the incessant sound of a waterfall could be heard. The Valley of the Fallen Phoenix was right before their eyes. Chapter 90. Senior, this is the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix, Tang Yin said to Bufang as he stood on top of a boulder and pointed at the fairyland-like Valley of the Fallen Phoenix in the distance. The Valley of the Fallen Phoenix was located at the boundary between the outer and inner layers of the Savage Land. Once one passed through the stone forest, it would be like entering a fairyland. The valley was filled with rare and precious medicinal herbs. A rich medicinal fragrance was emitted from the valley and lingered in the air above the valley, almost forming a colorful curtain. "What a marvelous place!" Bufang exclaimed in admiration. Only such a beautiful scenery matched the fantasy world in Bufang's heart. After coming to the Hidden Dragon continent for so long, this was the first time Bufang felt the wonders of a fantasy world. "Didn't you guys say that there was a spirit beast of a higher grade than the Thunderfire Spirit Pig? Where is it?" Bufang asked Tang Yin as his thoughts returned to the food after he finished admiring the beautiful scenery. "Senior, that spirit beast is hiding in this valley. We'll only be able to see it if we go in." Before Tang Yin could reply, Lu Xiaoxiao rushed to answer Bufang's question. Tang Yin glanced at his junior sister and slightly furrowed his eyebrows. He said to Bufang, "Senior, because of the special location of the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix, it is not safe inside. There might even be a 7th-grade spirit beast." Since the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix was located at the boundary between the outer and inner layers, it was not impossible for a 7th-grade spirit beast to appear there. "Oh, a 7th-grade spirit beast? That should be an ingredient of a higher grade than the Thunderfire Spirit Pig," Bufang lightly said. Tang Yin. A senior was indeed a senior. To think that a 7th-grade spirit beast was merely an ingredient in his eyes. At this moment, Tang Yin's admiration for Bufang had reached the level of looking up at a high mountain. Even a 7th-grade battle saint would find it difficult to fight against a 7th-grade spirit beast. However, in the mouth of a senior, a 7th-grade spirit beast was merely food. "How domineering! My senior is amazing!" With Tang Yin leading the way, the three of them passed through the stone forest and stepped into the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix. Lush greenery, the environment was tranquil, and the valley was overgrown with trees. At first glance, it was a stretch of greenery, but in the midst of this greenery, a few clusters of flowers could be seen, blooming beautifully in this winter. Although it was winter, the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix seemed to be a place of its own. There was no biting cold wind, nor was there any fluttering snow. Within the lush greenery, there was a warm and moist feeling that was incomparably comfortable. It was also Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao's first time stepping into the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix. Their eyes were filled with curiosity as they looked around. "Second brother, look, this is butterfly leaf grass. It's a 3rd-grade spirit herb." Lu Xiaoxiao's eyes were sharp. She saw a stalk of herb that was like a butterfly spreading its wings, and she immediately cried out in surprise. It was not only the butterfly leaf grass. In this valley there were all kinds of precious herbs. At the very least, the herbs that Bufang used to cook the sage herb phoenix chicken soup could be seen everywhere. The rumbling sound of the waterfall resounded in their ears. As the three of them picked the herbs, they followed the small path and quickly arrived in front of the waterfall. Surging water vapor violently surged over, bringing with it a gale that whistled past their bodies. Their clothes were blown up by the gale that was mixed with the water vapor. Everyone narrowed their eyes and looked forward. Is that a sage herb? Bufang raised his eyebrows and looked toward a purple leaf at the side of the waterfall. Below the leaf was the sage herb. Yes, it is the 5th grade spirit herb, the heavenly sage herb. I didn't expect that the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix would even have a sage herb. Tang Yin took a deep breath and said with some joy. Bufang nodded and walked forward. He would naturally not let go of a spirit herb like the sage herb, which was very familiar to him. There was no doubt that the sage herb was precious, especially since it was a rare delicacy. When Bufang was a few meters away from the heavenly sage herb, Bufang furrowed his eyebrows as he heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Bufang's expression did not change. With a wave of his arm, the unassuming golden dragon bone kitchen knife immediately appeared in his hand, and he slashed at the figure that was rushing toward him. The figure that was rushing toward him froze the moment the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared. Then, it was directly cut in half by Bufang's kitchen knife. Dark red blood splattered all over the ground. The 2 halves of the figure fell to the ground and violently twitched for a while. Hiss! Tang Yin immediately sucked in a breath of cold air when he saw this scene. That was a 5th grade spirit beast, the phantom lancehead viper. It was an extremely troublesome type of 5th grade spirit beast. After killing a viper, Bufang twirled the kitchen knife in his hand. Not a single speck of dust or blood could be seen on it as it turned into a wisp of green smoke and returned to the icon on Bufang's wrist. He pulled out the sage herb. The plump sage herb was filled with rich spirit energy. Even though it was slightly inferior to the sage herb provided by the system, it was still much better than the one provided by the Crown Prince. System, are you not going to provide me with some sort of spatial storage function? You can't possibly expect me to hold these spirit herbs with my bare hands, right? When the time comes, the ingredient might be a huge monster. Even if I manage to capture it, I won't be able to transport it back, Bufang said to the system. The system did not immediately reply and remained silent for a while. Spatial bag function is being activated. Countdown, 3, 2, 1. Activation complete. The host can use the spatial bag function, the system's serious and solemn voice sounded out. The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up. Then, with a thought, the sage herb in his hand was stored into the spatial bag. This spatial bag opened by the system was not small at all. It was roughly the size of the store. After storing the sage herb and some miscellaneous items into the spatial bag, Bufang's gaze once again landed on Tang Yin as he furrowed his brows. Where's the high-quality ingredient you mentioned? Bufang expressionlessly asked. Senior, don't be anxious. That spirit beast is in this valley, Tang Yin hurriedly said. He did not dare to anger Bufang. Along the way, the unfathomable feeling that Bufang gave him made him apprehensive. Second brother, look, is that Phoenix blood herb? Suddenly, Lu Xiaoxiao, who was standing beside Tang Yin, pointed at a small hill beside the waterfall and screamed. Her voice was filled with excitement. Phoenix blood herb? What was that? Bufang furrowed his brows and looked in the direction Lu Xiaoxiao was pointing at. He saw a blood-red blade of grass swaying in the wind on top of a small hill. It was like the tail of a phoenix, and a dense amount of spirit energy was being emitted from the blade of grass. Phoenix blood herb, a 7th grade herb. Legend has it that it mutated due to being contaminated with the blood of the ancient phoenix. Those who consume it will have the opportunity to rise from the ashes and be reborn from the ashes. It is an extremely good ingredient for medicinal cuisine. The system recommends that you collect it. Bufang's eyes lit up. The phoenix blood herb seemed pretty good. This phoenix blood herb is about to mature. At that time, those spirit beasts hiding in the valley might appear. Senior, the spirit beast you're looking for will also appear, Tang Yin said. The phoenix blood herb is a good item. I didn't expect that there would be such a pleasant surprise. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched as he indifferently said. The phoenix blood herb swaying in the wind became even more beautiful. A dense spirit energy was being emitted, almost forming a white fog in the surroundings. When Lu Xiaoxiao heard Bufang's words, her expression immediately changed. She said, "Senior, don't tell me you also want to obtain this phoenix blood herb?" Bufang frowned. He puzzledly turned his head and glanced at her. "Can't I?" As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Xiaoxiao's expression became ugly. Waves of intense spirit energy fluctuations were emitted from within the valley, and a terrifying pressure was continuously being emitted. Tang Yin's expression abruptly changed. He looked around and saw that the surroundings had unknowingly become densely packed with the shadows of beasts. Chapter 91. In the valley where spirit energy lingered, a white wave suddenly crashed down from the cliff and emitted a rumbling sound. It brought with it surging water vapor that scattered in all directions. Not far from the waterfall, Bufang and the others stood vigilantly as their gazes swept across their surroundings. Waves of beast roars rang out as spirit beasts with surging spirit energy emerged from the surroundings of the valley. A ferocious aura filled the entire valley, and there were at least several hundred densely packed beast silhouettes. Tang Yin's complexion became extremely pale, and there was not a single trace of blood on his face. As his gaze swept across these beast silhouettes, despair appeared in his eyes. He really did not expect that the temptation of the phoenix blood herb would be so great. The spirit energy emitted by the phoenix blood herb when it was about to ripen actually attracted so many spirit beasts. The strength of these spirit beasts were uneven. Among them, the majority were 5th-grade spirit beasts. However, there were also around a dozen 6th-grade spirit beasts. With such a lineup, not to mention Tang Yin, even 10 Tang Yins would find it hard to survive. Second brother. How could this be? How could there be so many spirit beasts? I don't want to die here. Lu Xiaoxiao's large eyes swept across these demonic beasts, and both her legs immediately began to tremble. If she knew that there were so many spirit beasts hiding in the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix, she would not have come in. Bufang's expression did not change much. He merely slightly frowned as he glanced at the surrounding spirit beasts in astonishment. The phoenix blood herb is filled with rich spirit energy and has a huge effect on the evolution of spirit beasts. Therefore, it is extremely attractive to spirit beasts, Tang Yin said in a serious tone as his gaze landed on Bufang's body. Senior, if you are able to escape from this Valley of the Fallen Phoenix, I hope that you can bring news of our deaths back to the sect. Tang Yin was in despair and his voice was filled with helplessness. Lu Xiaoxiao had already collapsed onto the ground and was crying like a pear blossom in the rain. She was extremely regretful that she had courted death by stepping into this valley. Suddenly, Lu Xiaoxiao seemed to have thought of something. She sobbed as she looked hopefully at Bufang. Senior, you are so powerful, you will definitely be able to save us, right? Don't you guys also want this phoenix blood herb? Bufang said as he looked at Lu Xiaoxiao indifferently. Lu Xiaoxiao's expression immediately stiffened as she stared blankly at Bufang. She saw green smoke curling around Bufang's hand, and that unassuming kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Don't take me for a fool. Didn't you want to make use of me in the beginning? It's true that there's a spiritual beast here, but you only wanted to use me to deal with the spiritual beast so that you could obtain the phoenix blood herb, right? The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched, revealing a faint smile as he looked at the dumbfounded Lu Xiaoxiao. When Tang Yin heard Bufang's words, he immediately let out a sigh. He was very clear that Bufang had long since guessed their intentions. However, Bufang might not have cared before because his target was the spiritual beast ingredient. Therefore, it didn't matter even if he was being used. However, now that they had fallen into a crisis, Bufang naturally would not be so courteous anymore. Tang Yin felt helpless in his heart. This junior sister of his, Lu Xiaoxiao, was actually not a bad person, but she had a lot of petty thoughts. It was fine when she was in the sect, but now that she had so many petty thoughts outside, it was very easy for her to offend people. "Do you guys still want the phoenix blood herb?" Bufang expressionlessly asked. At this moment, Lu Xiaoxiao's heart had already risen to her throat. When she heard Bufang's question, she hurriedly shook her head. No, no. Between her life and the phoenix blood herb, Lu Xiaoxiao chose life without any hesitation. "Senior, could it be that you have the confidence to resolve this desperate situation?" Tang Yin was also startled. Then, he suddenly became overjoyed and excitedly asked. As expected of a senior. This situation might be a desperate situation for them, but for an unfathomable senior like Bufang, it was not a desperate situation. Bufang glanced at him. Just as he was about to nod his head, he discovered that the surrounding herd of beasts had suddenly become restless. Rumble. Intense tremors occurred on both sides of the valley. Then, the sound of trees snapping rang out in the valley. Two enormous figures walked out from within, and a terrifying aura suppressed the entire valley. Tang Yin's face instantly turned deathly pale. As he gazed at the two figures that had just appeared, the hope that had originally arisen was once again shattered. Two 7th-grade spirit beasts. "It's over, we're dead for sure." Lu Xiaoxiao burst into tears again. The hope that had arisen was forcefully shattered. This kind of psychological disparity caused her to have an emotional breakdown. Bufang's eyes immediately lit up as he gazed at the enormous bull silhouette on his right that was burning with a faint red flame. My goodness! This ingredient is much better than the Thunder Fire Spirit Pig. Among the two 7th-grade spirit beasts, the one on the right was a 7th-grade wandering dragon bull. Its body was wrapped in an unending stream of flames, and it had the head of a bull and the tail of a dragon. The spirit beast on the left was also a 7th-grade spirit beast. It was a gigantic spirit ape with golden fur all over its body. Tang Yin knew that there was a 7th-grade wandering dragon bull in the valley, but he did not expect there to be another spirit ape. With two 7th-grade spirit beasts overseeing the valley, Tang Yin would not dare to enter even if he was given 100 guts. No matter how powerful the senior was, could he possibly deal with two 7th-grade spirit beasts? Even if a 7th-grade battle saint encountered these two spirit beasts, they would only be able to flee in panic. Rumble! The wandering dragon bull let out a roar and the entire valley seemed to be trembling. The spirit ape also bared its teeth and let out a shrill cry. The auras of the two sides immediately clashed with each other. The phoenix blood herb on the small hill swayed even more cheerfully, and the spirit energy it emitted became even denser. Vaguely, there seemed to be a phoenix rising from the ashes about to soar into the sky. The phoenix blood herb was about to mature. Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao were also on the verge of despair. They clearly knew that once the phoenix blood herb matured, the valley would definitely turn into a battlefield for the two 7th-grade spirit beasts. At that time, the few of them would definitely be torn into pieces by the enraged spirit beast. Bufang did not pay attention to the others. His gaze, like the two 7th-grade spirit beasts, also landed on the phoenix blood herb. That was a precious spirit herb that could incite a war between 7th-grade spirit beasts. The water from the waterfall gushed down and crashed into the pond. Suddenly, in just an instant, the entire valley became silent, so silent that it made one's heart palpitate. The rumbling sound of the waterfall disappeared, the snorting sound of the wandering dragon bull disappeared, and the shrill cry of the spirit ape could not be heard either. The entire valley seemed to have turned into a forbidden zone for sound. On top of the small hill, the phoenix blood grass swayed gently as red specks of light emitted from it. Red spots appeared on the leaves of the grass, and the dark red color was like burning blood. A phoenix cry resounded throughout the entire silent valley. After the phoenix cry, all sounds returned to normal. The phoenix blood herb had matured. Moo! The wandering dragon bull let out a roar and its eyes suddenly turned blood-red. Its hooves abruptly stomped on the ground, and it madly galloped toward the phoenix blood herb. The entire valley began to tremble. The 6th grade and 5th grade demonic beasts behind the wandering dragon bull also madly roared and rushed out one after another to follow behind the wandering dragon bull. The spirit ape fiercely pounded its chest with its fists and let out a shrill cry. It also dashed toward the phoenix blood herb with a majestic horde of spirit beasts following behind it. Bufang and the other two, who were at the border between the two sides, were instantly like a small boat in the middle of a vast ocean. In front of these gigantic spirit beasts, it was as if they would be trampled into mincemeat in the next moment. Tang Yin and Lu Xiaoxiao had already closed their eyes in despair. Bufang expressionlessly glanced at the spirit beasts galloping toward him from both sides. He unhurriedly raised the golden dragon bone kitchen knife and raised it above his head. The true energy within his body suddenly burst forth and surged into the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. A resplendent golden color blossomed like the scorching sun and was incomparably glaring. A gigantic translucent golden kitchen knife was carried on Bufang's shoulder. With Bufang as the center, a vast dragon's might immediately spread out in all directions and turned into a wave of ripples. In the next moment, the figures of all the frantically galloping spirit beasts came to an abrupt halt and fell to the ground in a panic. Once the kitchen knife was unsheathed, 10,000 beasts prostrated themselves. The god of cooking set, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. It was that domineering. Chapter 92. The pressure released by the golden dragon bone kitchen knife spread out like a ripple and instantly poured down, causing all of the spirit beasts to lie on the ground. Spirit beasts below the 5th grade were all shivering under this pressure. Spirit beasts were a species with a very strict hierarchy. They worshipped the strong and feared the strong. The suppressive effect of a high-grade spirit beast on a low-grade spirit beast was very obvious. Therefore, in the wildlands, spirit beasts were divided into territories. This was also the reason why the wildlands had its outer, inner, and central areas. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife contained the might of a dragon. The dragon race had always stood at the top of the food chain of spirit beasts. They looked down on all spirit beasts and were the kings of spirit beasts. They had the ability to suppress any spirit beast. Therefore, Bufang raised the golden dragon bone kitchen knife and infused his true energy into it, activating the golden dragon bone kitchen knife's form. The resplendent golden light was incomparably dazzling. Accompanied by the surging might of the golden dragon, all of the spirit beasts in the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix were lying on the ground. Even the spirit ape and the wandering dragon cow were no exception. A strong gale spread out with Bufang at the center, causing his hair to flutter unceasingly. The long robe on his body also fluttered in the wind. He carried the giant golden dragon bone kitchen knife on his shoulder and raised his head. His face was expressionless as he swept his gaze over all the spirit beasts. Even though the wandering dragon cow was a 7th grade spirit beast, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife suppression on it was even stronger than the other spirit beasts. Because a trace of the dragon race's bloodline flowed through its veins, it could only lie on the ground and shiver in the face of the authentic dragon race's might. Tang Yin originally closed his eyes in despair, but he suddenly realized that the surroundings seemed to have quietened down. The stampede of beasts he imagined did not happen. He immediately opened his eyes in puzzlement and immediately saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. Lu Xiaoxiao was so frightened that her beautiful face turned pale. Her face was also filled with astonishment. There were still traces of tears on her face and her mouth was slightly open. She blankly stared at Bufang, who was carrying a gigantic golden kitchen knife not far away. The surroundings were filled with spirit beasts prostrating on the ground. What the hell is going on? Senior. Tang Yin felt that his mouth was a little dry. What did he just see? What exactly happened here? These spiritual beasts, including the two 7th-grade spiritual beasts, were actually kneeling in front of Senior. Senior was actually this powerful? Did he just rely on his aura to conquer this group of spirit beasts? Is this Senior's true strength? The reverence in Tang Yin's heart grew, and he felt that Bufang was unfathomable. He was even more powerful than the sect leader of his own sect. At least the sect leader couldn't make a spiritual beast crawl before him. At this moment, in his eyes, Bufang, whose true energy level was only at the 4th-grade battle spirit level, suddenly became as lofty as an 8th-grade war god. Bufang carried the kitchen knife and rolled his eyes. His gaze landed on Tang Yin, who was staring at him with a constantly changing expression. Bufang frowned and said, "Aren't you guys going to escape?" Tang Yin was stunned. "If I were you, I would run away now and never look back." "I would run as far as I can," Bufang said expressionlessly. Tang Yin immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He instantly understood what Bufang meant. Senior was creating an opportunity for them to escape. Otherwise, with Senior's unfathomable cultivation level, he would have already started fighting with the spiritual beast. Why would he care about them? He was touched, indescribably touched. Tang Yin clenched his teeth and pulled up the dumbfounded Lu Xiaoxiao. He respectfully bowed toward Bufang and solemnly said, "Senior, I will never be able to repay you for saving my life today. Senior, take care. Yes, let's go. Oh, remember to visit Fong Fong's little store in the Light Wind Empire when you have time. The delicacies there are pretty good and the prices are very affordable," Bufang simply said. Tang Yin was startled for a moment. He seriously nodded and pulled Lu Xiaoxiao away. Second brother, the phoenix blood herb? Lu Xiaoxiao seemed to have just regained her senses. She anxiously blurted out when she saw Tang Yin pulling her away. "You're still thinking about the phoenix blood herb at this moment? Do you want to die?" Tang Yin was also infuriated. Senior was magnanimous enough to create an opportunity for them to escape, yet his junior sister was still thinking about the phoenix blood herb. It was simply unreasonable. At this moment, Lu Xiaoxiao also realized what was going on. She glanced at the expressionless yet unfathomable Bufang in the distance, and her entire body trembled. Then, without saying a word, she followed Tang Yin and left. Bufang watched as the two figures left the Valley of the Fallen Phoenix, and his gaze once again fell upon the spirit beasts in front of him. The true energy within his body was gradually becoming insufficient in order to maintain the form of the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. Therefore, Bufang no longer hesitated. He held the handle of the kitchen knife with one hand and abruptly pressed it down. Immediately, a surging pressure was once again released. The spiritual beasts that were lying on the ground all trembled. Bufang pointed his kitchen knife at the spirit ape. He raised his head and indifferently said, "You're not suitable to be my ingredient, so scram." The spirit ape's enormous figure trembled, and it immediately bared its teeth at Bufang. However, its eyes were still filled with fear and unwillingness. The phoenix blood herb had already matured. To give it up just like that, as a 7th-grade spirit beast that had just gained sentience, it was naturally unwilling. Are you really not leaving?" Bufang knitted his brows. He waved the kitchen knife in his hand and walked to the wandering dragon cow's side. The wandering dragon cow's entire head was buried in the ground and its draconic tail was curled up. It did not dare to move at all. Even though it possessed the dragon bloodline, it was completely suppressed. Bufang did not say anything. He indifferently looked at the spirit ape and then swung his kitchen knife down, cutting off the wandering dragon cow's horn as if he was cutting through tofu. The wandering dragon cow felt wronged. If you wanted him to leave, shouldn't you go and deal with him instead? Why did you bully a cow? Did you really think that cows were easy to bully? As an old rival, The spirit ape naturally knew how hard and sharp the horn of the wandering dragon cow was. However, this horn was actually cut off by a single slash from this terrifying human. Fine, a good monkey would not fight with a treacherous human like you. With a sharp cry, the seventh-grade spirit ape leaped up with a belly full of unwillingness. It directly leaped out of the valley and disappeared into the distance in an instant. The spiritual beasts that followed behind the spirit ape also retreated like a receding tide. After using the same method to drive away the spiritual beasts behind the wandering dragon cow, only Bufang, who was carrying the enormous golden dragon bone kitchen knife, and the trembling wandering dragon cow, who was lying on the ground with one of its horns broken, were left in the entire valley. Bufang patted the wandering dragon cow's enormous body and clicked his tongue in wonder. Not bad, this ingredient is much better than the thunder fire spirit pig. The wandering dragon cow's big head was filled with doubt. Ingredient? What ingredient? In the next instant, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife gradually enlarged in front of the wandering dragon cow's eyes enlarged. When the true energy within its body was finally exhausted to the point where it could no longer maintain the golden dragon bone kitchen knife's form, the kitchen knife returned to its unremarkable appearance and turned into smoke before dissipating. Bufang patted the wandering dragon cow's enormous corpse once again. With a wave of his hand, he stored it into the spatial bag provided by the system. Congratulations to the host for completing the abrupt mission. Carry out the first ingredient capture. The mission reward will now be issued. In 1 minute, the teleportation will begin. Please prepare yourself. Just as the wandering dragon cow's corpse was put away, the system's solemn and earnest voice rang out. Bufang was startled. Only 1 minute left? The phoenix blood herb had not been plucked yet. A small speck of light had already appeared above Bufang's head. This small speck of light was slowly drawing a mysterious teleportation array. Bufang was already used to this sight. When he thought of the phoenix blood herb, Bufang did not hesitate. He turned around and ran toward the small hill. The speck of light above his head was still drawing. As time passed, the magic array was already halfway completed. 10 seconds until the return. Countdown begins. 10. 9. Bufang's face was still expressionless, but anxiety could be seen in his eyes. He was getting closer and closer to the phoenix blood herb, but the countdown to the return was also constantly approaching. Give me 1 more second. I can pry open the entire valley, Bufang shouted in his heart. Then, he leaped with all his might and grabbed the phoenix blood herb that was like a phoenix soaring into the sky. A sharp pain was instantly transmitted from his palm to his brain. However, before he could let out a scream, the magic array was already completed. A gust of violent wind whistled out and then dissipated. The valley of the fallen phoenix once again returned to its peaceful state. The waterfall flowed down and everything returned to normal. Chapter 93. Light Wind Empire, the Imperial City, Fong Fong's little store. Within the void of the store, a speck of light appeared. Then, this speck of light rapidly wandered around in the void and drew a magic array. As a gust of wind swept by, a figure appeared under the magic array. Bufang absent-mindedly returned to the store. His entire body was dizzy and he plopped down on the floor, gasping for breath. His breathing was extremely heavy. The host has returned to the store. The mission reward will now be distributed. The system's serious and solemn voice resounded in Bufang's mind. However, Bufang did not pay attention to it. His gaze landed on a fiery red herb that he was tightly grasping in his hand. The herb was extremely hot when he held it in his hand, as if he was holding a piece of magma. Fortunately, I managed to catch it. Otherwise, it would be such a waste if I missed out on this 7th-grade spirit herb after working so hard for so long. The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up and a smile seemed to appear on his stiff face. The phoenix blood herb was entirely dark red in color. A matured phoenix blood herb became even more resplendent, as if it was carved out of exquisite red agate. There were specks of dark red on its surface, as if it was stained with blood. As he held it in his hand, he felt an incomparable heat. However, this heat was not acting on his skin, but on his mind instead. He found a jade box and put away the phoenix blood herb. He did not choose to put it into the system's spatial bag. Instead, he placed the phoenix blood herb into a cupboard. Similarly, he also took out the sage ginseng that he had plucked. The sage ginseng was plump and extremely alluring as it emitted a fragrance. Bufang resisted the temptation and put the sage ginseng into the cupboard as well. After doing all this, Bufang finally let out a long breath and stretched his back. The bones in his entire body emitted the sound of colliding. This first time capturing ingredients was actually a rather meaningful experience. The god of cooking set is still the god of cooking set after all. Without the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, I really can't do anything. No wonder the system only activated this cooking ingredient hunting mission after I obtained the god of cooking set. Bufang twisted his neck and walked upstairs. Bufang took a shower first. His hair was loose and dripping with water. He felt much more refreshed. He returned to his room. Bufang was tired after hunting for ingredients for 2 days. It was time for him to have a good sleep. But before he went to sleep, he wanted to understand the quest reward that the system had just given him. Rice noodle roll cooking techniques? Bufang narrowed his eyes. He was very interested in this new dish. As a chef, he was no stranger to the rice noodle roll. After all, it was a very delicious breakfast. The rice noodle roll was a type of rice product. It was also known as pulled rice noodle roll, rolled rice noodle roll, or pig rice noodle roll. It could be considered a relatively simple delicacy. The main step was to steam the rice milk until it was thin. Then, the filling that had just been stir-fried would be poured into the thin skin and rolled up. As Bufang thought about the cooking method of the rice noodle roll, he could not help but feel a little itchy in his heart. He could not wait to try this delicacy that had just appeared. However, after thinking about it, he still gave up. The main reason was that he had exhausted too much of his true energy. He was a little tired and seemed a little lazy. Another reason was that the rice noodle roll was considered a breakfast dish. It was best to wake up early in the morning and cook it. Therefore, Bufang gave up on the urge to practice cooking. He lay on his bed and quickly fell asleep. The night quietly passed. The next day, just after dawn, Bufang got out of bed. He stretched his body and washed up. After that, he went to the kitchen and practiced his cutting skills. His meteor cutting skill was almost at the peak of the first level. He would probably be able to reach the peak after another day of training tomorrow. After finishing his cutting skills practice, Bufang cooked a dish of sweet and sour ribs. This was Blacka's daily meal. Bufang was very skilled at cooking. Soon, the rich and intoxicating aroma of the meat wafted in the kitchen. Carrying the dish of sweet and sour ribs into the store, Bufang opened the door and the cold wind immediately whistled in. The imperial city of the Light Wind Empire had officially entered winter. The sky was overcast and there seemed to be a sign of heavy snow. Blackie, it's time to eat. As Bufang carried the dish of sweet and sour ribs to Blackie, the gluttonous dog instantly jumped up from the ground. It stuck out its tongue and excitedly stared at the sweet and sour ribs in Bufang's hand. I haven't eaten for 2 days. I'm starving to death, Lord Go. Blackie's eyes were shining as it stared fixedly at the sweet and sour ribs. The intoxicating aroma of the meat almost made Blackie fall into a trance. When Bufang placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of it, it impatiently started gobbling down the plate. It was the same recipe and the same taste. Sweet and sour ribs. This was the taste. Looking at Blackie's tail that was constantly wagging while gobbling down the plate, the corners of Bufang's mouth curled up. He turned around and stepped into the kitchen, preparing to try the rice noodle roll. He first took out the rice milk prepared by the system. The rice milk was as white as milk and emitted a faint fragrance. It was obvious that the rice used to grind the rice milk was not ordinary rice. Bufang poured the rice milk into a specially made tray. The tray was not thick, so the rice milk was not very thick either. It was about 2 millimeters. After pouring the rice milk, Bufang placed the tray into the steamer rack to cook. While the rice milk was cooking, Bufang started to prepare the meat filling required for the rice noodle roll. Pork or beef, shrimp, vegetable leaves, dried vegetables. Bufang muttered as he prepared all the ingredients. However, when he took out the pork prepared by the system, he was slightly taken aback. An idea involuntarily emerged in his mind. System, if I change this pork to wandering dragon cow's beef, it should work, right? Bufang asked. Yes, but because of the change of ingredients, the price of the dish will change, the system seriously said. How big of a change? Bufang curiously asked. The system's solemn voice rang out once more. The original filling of the rice noodle roll was third-grade spirit pork. After the host changes it to seventh-grade wandering dragon cow's beef, the price of the rice noodle roll will increase from 10 crystals to 60 crystals per serving. Increased from 10 crystals to 60 crystals. Bufang blinked his eyes and couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. Seventh-grade ingredients were seventh-grade ingredients after all. It was indeed impressive. However, with such an expensive rice noodle roll, no one would choose to eat it. System, can the rice noodle roll with wandering dragon cow's beef as the improved rice noodle roll? Yes, the system replied. This was actually the same principle as egg-fried rice and the improved egg-fried rice. Bufang nodded his head. A wisp of green smoke flashed in his hand and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. He began to prepare the filling. He first cooked the third-grade spirit pork and prepared to make the normal rice noodle roll. After preparing the meat filling, he took out a small piece of wandering dragon cow's beef. The wandering dragon cow was huge, so taking out such a small piece of meat was really nothing. The two types of meat filling were placed separately and the rice milk was also cooked. When the tray was taken out, white steam rose from it. The steam was mixed with the fragrance of rice, and it was rich and intoxicating, causing Bufang to involuntarily take in a deep breath. He took out the cooked rice noodle roll from the tray. The rice noodle roll was sparkling and translucent like jade. It was as smooth as a mirror and was extremely pleasing to the eye. After taking out the rice noodle roll, the dragon bone kitchen knife in Bufang's hand spun for a while. Then, the rice noodle roll was evenly divided into rectangular pieces. After taking out a piece of rice noodle roll, Bufang first placed the third-grade spirit pork, shrimp, and vegetable fillings on top of it. Then, he carefully rolled it up. A snow-white, paper-thin, glossy, fragrant, and delicious rice noodle roll was completed. Chapter 94. Like a piece of exquisitely carved jade, Bufang carried the rice noodle roll back into the store. As he stared at the glossy and shiny rice noodle roll, his stomach involuntarily let out a slight growl. The aroma of the rice noodle roll was not very strong. Perhaps it was because it was wrapped in the rice noodle wrapper. However, its appearance was extremely appetizing. At least, Bufang could no longer hold it in. When eating the rice noodle roll, it naturally had to be paired with a special dipping sauce. The sour and refreshing dipping sauce coupled with the smooth and delicious rice noodle roll, just the thought of it was enough to excite anyone. After taking a bite of the rice noodle roll, the oil in the minced meat immediately overflowed. The accumulated aroma of the meat burst forth in an instant and instantly surged onto Bufang's face, causing him to be completely intoxicated. The rice noodle wrapper was smooth and had an excellent texture. It slightly bounced on the walls of his mouth and emitted an elasticity when he bit down. As expected, the products produced by the system were definitely of the highest quality. The taste of the rice noodle roll was indeed not bad, and was worthy of the price of 10 crystals. Bufang nodded his head and then continued to attack the rice noodle roll. Owner Boo, you're finally open. I've missed you so much these past 2 days. While Bufang was eating the rice noodle roll, a rough voice came from outside the door. Fatty Jean and his army of fatties had arrived in a grandiose manner. The moment they entered the store, they saw Bufang eating the rice noodle roll. Fatty Jin's eyes immediately lit up. As he smelled the aroma within the store, he was a little impatient. Owner Boo, is this another new dish? Fatty Jean asked. Oh yes, Bufang, with his mouth still stuffed with the rice noodle roll, gave Fatty Jean a glance and calmly replied. Fatty Jean swallowed a mouthful of saliva. When he saw Bufang swallow the last mouthful of the rice noodle roll, his stomach involuntarily rumbled. He turned his head to look at the menu on the wall. New dish. Rice noodle roll, right? There's an improved version like the egg-fried rice? Fatty Jean exclaimed in surprise. He then looked at the price of the rice noodle roll. 10 crystals for a serving of rice noodle roll. 60 crystals per serving? Owner Boo. The price difference is ridiculous. Lao Jean turned his head and said to Bufang, who was cleaning the plates. You'll know if the price is outrageous after you eat it. Bufang was expressionless. After replying, he returned to the kitchen and placed the plates on the dishwasher before returning to the store. Fatty Jean was actually a little conflicted. Although he had money, he still couldn't afford a few hundred yuan crystals a day, even though his family mined yuan crystal mines. Let's have an ordinary rice noodle roll first, then a serving of sweet and sour ribs and red braised pork. Oh, and a serving of improved egg-fried rice. After eating Owner Boo's egg-fried rice, my cultivation speed has increased by a lot. I'm about to break through to 4th grade battle spirit, Fatty Jean said with a chuckle. Okay, wait a moment. Bufang nodded. After taking note of the other people's orders, he turned around and stepped into the kitchen. Now that he had the God of Cooking set, Bufang's knife skills had improved by a lot. The speed at which he processed the ingredients was much faster than before. In just a short while, he had finished processing all the ingredients and started cooking. A rich aroma once again drifted out from the kitchen. The aroma drifted into the store, and Fatty Jean and the others could not help but become intoxicated. The dishes cooked by Owner Boo smell so good. Just the smell alone makes me feel satisfied, Fatty Jean hummed in an intoxicated manner. After a while, Bufang carried the dishes out of the kitchen. He first served Fatty Jean the rice noodle roll. This was also the dish that Fatty Jean wanted to eat the most. After all, it was a new dish, and he obviously wanted to try it first. Here's your rice noodle roll, please enjoy, Bufang lightly said as he placed the rice noodle roll in front of Fatty Jean and placed a small plate of dipping sauce on it. Fatty Jean looked at the rice noodle roll that was as translucent as jade and resembled a work of art. He could not help but lick his lips. He immediately grabbed a piece of the rice noodle roll, dipped it in the dipping sauce and impatiently took a bite. The elastic skin of the rice noodle roll was wrapped around the fragrant spirit pork. When he bit into it, the oil that seeped out caused Fatty Jin's body to involuntarily shiver. His eyes instantly lit up. It's delicious. Owner Boo's dishes are indeed exquisite. Fatty Jean licked his lips and continued eating the rice noodle roll after licking away the oil. However, with his appetite, he finished the rice noodle roll in just 3 bites. As he sucked on his fingers, the fat on Fatty Jin's face was almost twisted into a ball. Such a small piece was enough to make him want more. However, Owner Boo's dishes could only be ordered once. Owner Boo, give me a serving of the improved rice noodle roll. Unable to resist the temptation of the rice noodle roll, Fatty Jean clenched his teeth and ordered the improved rice noodle roll. 1 rice noodle roll was equivalent to 6 ordinary rice noodle rolls. In the kitchen, Bufang was slightly startled. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up and he nodded. He first served the other dishes to Fatty Jean, then served the others' dishes one after another. Finally, he began to cook Fatty Jean's improved rice noodle roll. The steps of the improved rice noodle roll were basically the same. The main change was in the meat filling. It used an ingredient that Bufang personally caught, the 7th grade wandering dragon cow's meat. Bufang took out a small piece of the wandering dragon cow's meat. The wandering dragon cow's meat was extremely tender and the veins on its surface seemed to be overflowing with light and vibrant colors. Bufang used the dragon bone kitchen knife to mince the beef. Since the dragon bone kitchen knife was able to preserve the ingredient's spirit energy, the spirit energy of the wandering dragon cow's meat was perfectly preserved. After it was cooked, the fragrance of the meat exploded in the kitchen like a bomb. Even the fatties in the store were attracted by the fragrance. They all swallowed their saliva and looked toward Bufang's direction. What kind of meat was this? It was actually so fragrant. They had never smelled such fragrant meat before. This was the thought in the minds of all the fatties. They were looking forward to the next dish that Bufang would bring out. Soon, a tall and thin figure walked out of the kitchen. His slender fingers were holding a porcelain plate. On the porcelain plate, there was a sparkling and translucent rice noodle roll. Everyone's eyes that were originally filled with anticipation immediately revealed a trace of disappointment. So it was still the rice noodle roll. Fatty Jean did not mind. After all, he was the one eating it. Therefore, he happily waited for the improved rice noodle roll. Foolish people! This is the improved rice noodle roll, 60 crystals for a serving. How can you judge a dish from its appearance? You have to pay attention to its inner beauty. The fat on Fatty Jean's face was constantly trembling. The improved rice noodle roll, please enjoy, Bufang calmly said. Fatty Jean glanced at Bufang. Then, he grabbed the rice noodle roll, dipped it in the sauce, and sent it into his mouth while trembling. This mouthful was 20 essence crystals. Fatty Jean felt that he was not biting a rice noodle roll, but a precious crystal essence. Therefore, he was very careful. After he finished biting, he even pursed his lips so that not a single piece of meat would be wasted. Once the rice noodle roll entered his mouth, the difference immediately appeared. Fatty Jean's eyes were originally very small, but under everyone's gaze, this old man's small eyes actually widened to the maximum within a second. His nostrils expanded and 2 streams of hot air were spat out. The hot air was filled with dense spirit energy. Gulp! After chewing for a while, Fatty Jean swallowed the rice noodle roll. His entire body seemed to have experienced a roller coaster as he heaved a sigh of relief. How is the taste? Bufang was also a little curious as he asked. He had never tried the improved rice noodle roll before. However, the taste of the 7th grade wandering dragon meat was definitely not bad. On this point, Bufang was still very confident. Fatty Jean's mouth was trembling and his nostrils were constantly spitting out spirit energy. He looked at Bufang and gave him 2 thumbs up. Unparalleled. Extremely delicious. Fatty Jean grinned and said, "This dense spirit energy made the true energy in my body reach a bottleneck in an instant. My confidence in breaking through has become even greater." After Fatty Jean finished praising, he no longer spoke. After finishing the rice noodle roll, he hurriedly paid the bill and left with his army of fatties. He was going back to break through his cultivation. Bufang also heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. It seemed like the ingredients he caught had a pretty good response. After cleaning up the bowls and chopsticks, the store became quiet for a moment. Bufang pulled a chair over and curled up at the entrance. Looking at the empty alley that had been repaired by the Crown Prince's men, a trace of doubt involuntarily emerged in his heart. Usually, the little girl should already be here by this time, right? Why isn't she here today? Could it be that she forgot that I will be opening the store today? Bufang thought to himself as he let out a satisfied breath. Chapter 95. Imperial City, Ouyang Manor. Old Master Ouyang sat in the main hall with a solemn expression. Almost all the members of the Ouyang clan had gathered here. Ouyang Zongheng sat below the elder with a solemn expression like a statue. The atmosphere in the entire main hall became extremely solemn. Xiao Yi pursed her lips and was unhappy. Her big eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. After shooting a glance at the old man sitting in the hall, she unhappily harumphed and turned her head away. You three brats, watch over Xiaoyi. Don't allow her to take even half a step out of the Ouyang Manor today. The elder felt a headache coming on when he saw Ouyang Xiaoyi like that, but he still kept a straight face and instructed the three barbarians of Ouyang. The three barbarians of Ouyang nodded and solemnly looked at Ouyang Xiaoyi. However, when they were glared at by the angry Ouyang Xiaoyi, the three of them immediately shrunk back in guilt. Grandpa, why don't you allow me to go out? The store still needs my help. Ouyang Xiaoyi angrily asked the elder. The elder also glared at her. Girl, Grandpa is doing this for your own good. The situation in the Imperial City has become grim these past few days. The Crown Prince and Second Prince have begun to wantonly rope in the officials of the Imperial Court. In order to rope in people, they are resorting to any means possible. Isn't this because they are afraid that something might happen to you? Even if that's the case, you can't stop me from going to the store to help. Ouyang Xiaoyi was still unwilling as she angrily said with a pout. Help? Help what? You are the daughter of a general. Why are you always showing your face in public and going to a small store to work as a waitress? What a scandal! The elder was also angered by the stubborn girl as his beard twitched. When Ouyang Xiaoyi heard this, she immediately crossed her arms and coldly glanced at the elder. She lightly smiled and said, Grandpa, that's not what you said yesterday. When I broke through to 4th grade battle spirit yesterday, you were clearly very happy and couldn't wait for me to work as a waitress every day. The elder's body stiffened and a trace of embarrassment appeared on his face. However, he soon shamelessly grinned and said, I said I'm not allowed to go, so I'm not allowed to go. Today, you will obediently stay in the manor. Humph! Smelly Grandpa! I'm ignoring you! Ouyang Xiaoyi was furious. He snorted at old Master Ouyang, cocked his head, and left the great hall in a huff. What are you three brats doing standing there for? Go watch that girl. The old man roared at the three barbarians of Ouyang who were watching the show. Ouyang Zongheng wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Father, we can't mess up the seniority. How is His Majesty doing? Old Master Ouyang calmed down as he watched the three barbarians of Ouyang leave dejectedly. He turned his head and asked Ouyang Zongheng, who was wiping his cold sweat. Ouyang Zongheng's expression immediately turned cold as he solemnly said, The situation is not optimistic. Old Master Ouyang immediately sighed. When His Majesty was young, he had gone on a campaign against the sects and fought with many experts, leaving behind a body full of hidden injuries. Now that he had reached old age, these hidden injuries had suddenly flared up. Even Emperor Chongfeng would not be able to withstand them. Ouyang Zongheng also helplessly sighed. The situation in the capital was already somewhat grim. If His Majesty were to die, the capital would instantly descend into chaos. This was also the reason why the old man did not allow Ouyang Xiaoyi to leave the Ouyang Manor. For a moment, the lobby fell into silence and no one spoke. After a long while, a figure quickly rushed into the lobby and knelt in front of old Master Ouyang with a secret letter in his hand. The old man's eyelids twitched as he opened the secret letter and quickly skimmed through its contents. After he finished reading, the old man's expression became extremely ugly and even his white beard was slightly trembling. Father, how is the situation? Ouyang Zongheng swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked. With a burst of true energy, the old man directly burned the secret letter into ashes with a trembling hand. A trace of sadness and sorrow appeared in his eyes. His Majesty has passed away. After saying that, the old man seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. On the main street of the imperial city, a petite figure was skipping toward Fong Fong's little store. Humph! Idiot grandfather! He actually let my 3 idiot brothers watch over me. How could their blockheads watch over the intelligent Xiaoyi? Ouyang Xiaoyi's big eyes narrowed into the shape of a crescent moon. She could not help but laugh when she thought of her grandfather's angry expression when he found out about her escape. It's snowing. As Ouyang Xiaoyi was walking, she suddenly let out a cry of surprise and puzzledly raised her head. She saw a gust of cold wind blowing past from the overcast sky, and then snowflakes as white as goose feathers quietly drifted down. Ouyang Xiaoyi extended her fair palm, and a snowflake landed on it. It silently melted and turned into a bone-chilling snowy water as if the sky was weeping. How beautiful! Xiaoyi softly murmured as she exhaled a breath of white air. Then, she flung away the water and continued walking. The first snowfall of the imperial city came so suddenly. The pedestrians on the main street all stopped to admire it for a while before hurrying on. Behind Ouyang Xiaoyi, several figures abruptly followed. In an instant, they sped up and surrounded Ouyang Xiaoyi. Ouyang Xiaoyi's big eyes immediately widened. True energy immediately burst forth from her body in an attempt to break out of the encirclement. However, the cultivation levels of the people surrounding her were actually all 5th-grade battle kings. It was impossible for Ouyang Xiaoyi to escape, and she was captured. "Let go of me! My father is General Ouyang, and my grandfather is an elder of the imperial court. If you kidnap me, I will be beaten up." Ouyang Xiaoyi was furious. There were actually people who dared to attack the general's daughter in the imperial city. The battle kings glanced at Ouyang Xiaoyi. They could not be bothered to waste their breath on her. They immediately stuffed a rag into her mouth and carried her away. "Go back and report to the young master that the mission is completed." A figure nodded, then tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and instantly left the group. Bu Fong was curled up on a chair as he watched the heavy snowflakes slowly falling from the overcast sky of the alleyway. He could not help but shrink his body. It was snowing and the weather had become even colder. There were very few customers today. It was so few that Bu Fong was not used to it. Most of the regulars did not show up. "Is it because of the snow?" Bu Fong muttered in a low voice as he curled up on a chair. Suddenly, the sound of messy footsteps came from the alleyway. 3 burly figures like bears appeared in front of the store. "Huh? Aren't these the 3 Ouyang brothers?" Bu Fong was slightly astonished as he looked at the 3 Ouyang brothers who anxiously appeared in front of the store. "Owner Bu, did that last Xiaoyi come to your place?" Ouyang Zhen panted heavily as he directly asked. "That girl actually lied to us and snuck out. What happened to the basic trust between brothers and sisters?" Ouyang Di said. Bu Fong expressionlessly looked at the 3 brothers and indifferently said, "Ouyang Xiaoyi did not come today." "Did not come? How? How could she?" Ouyang Wu stared at Bu Fong. Then, as if he had thought of something, the 3 brothers' expressions suddenly changed. They looked at each other and said, "Oh no! Xiaoyi snuck out just to come to the store." However, at this moment she was not in the store. There was only one possibility. "How dare these bastards kidnap my little sister?" Ouyang Zhen angrily roared. The 3 brothers immediately turned around and left in a rage, leaving behind a confused Bu Fong. Bu Fong expressionlessly watched the 3 of them leave. The corners of his mouth twitched. These 3 brothers must be stupid. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.